Hey guys, welcome to Will I Run for President? I'm Willis, I'm your host. Today we will be going through more bills that went through the House and the Senate like we always do. Um, we are going to do one little small change. There is a bill that is excessively long. I will be doing that one last, giving kind of my opinion on it first, before playing it just because of how long it is. Um, I don't want it to kind of put you to sleep right here at the beginning of the episode because it's like the third bill that we would have covered. So we're just going to get right into it. We're going to start here with HR21.
There are two versions. Text available as XML/HTML, XML/HTML, new window, 13 kilobytes. TXT, 8 kilobytes. PDF, 113 kilobytes. Formatting necessary for an accurate reading of this legislative text may be missing or may be shown by tags, for example, deleted, or bold, or may be missing from TXT display. Shown here, engrossed in House, January 3, 2025. 119th Congress First Session. H.R. 21. To amend Title 18, United States Code, to prohibit a healthcare practitioner from failing to exercise the proper degree of care in the case of a child who survives an abortion or attempted abortion. In the House of Representatives. January 3, 2025. Mrs. Wagner, for herself, Mr. Scalise, and Mrs. Kamek, introduced the following bill, which was referred to the Committee on the Judiciary. A bill to amend Title 18, United States Code, to prohibit a healthcare practitioner from failing to exercise the proper degree of care in the case of a child who survives an abortion or attempted abortion. Be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America and Congress assembled. Section 1. Short title. This act may be cited as the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. SEC. 2. Findings. Constitutional authority. A. Findings. Congress finds as follows. 1. If an abortion results in the live birth of an infant, the infant is a legal person for all purposes under the laws of the United States, and entitled to all the protections of such laws. Share this. 2. Any infant born alive after an abortion or within a hospital, clinic, or other facility has the same claim to the protection of the law that would arise for any newborn, or for any person who comes to a hospital, clinic, or other facility for screening and treatment or otherwise becomes a patient within its care. B. Constitutional authority. In accordance with the above findings, Congress enacts the following pursuant to Congress power under 1. Section 5 of the 14th Amendment, including the power to enforce the prohibition on government action denying equal protection of the laws. And 2. Section 8 of Article I to make all laws necessary and proper for carrying into execution the powers vested by the Constitution of the United States, including the power to regulate commerce under Clause 3 of such section. SEC. 3. Born alive infants protection. A. Requirements pertaining to born alive abortion survivors. Chapter 74 of Title 18, United States Code, is amended by inserting after Section 1531 the following. Section 1532. Requirements pertaining to born alive abortion survivors. A. Requirements for healthcare practitioners in the case of an abortion or attempted abortion that results in a child born alive, as defined in Section 8 of Title 1, United States Code, commonly known as the Born Alive Infants Protection Act. 1. Degree of care required. Immediate admission to a hospital. Any healthcare practitioner present at the time the child is born alive shall A. Exercise the same degree of professional skill, care, and diligence to preserve the life and health of the child as a reasonably diligent and conscientious healthcare practitioner would render to any other child born alive at the same gestational age. And B. Following the exercise of skill, care, and diligence required under subparagraph A, ensure that the child born alive is immediately transported and admitted to a hospital. 2. Mandatory reporting of violations. A healthcare practitioner or any employee of a hospital, a physician's office, or an abortion clinic who has knowledge of a failure to comply with the requirements of paragraph 1 shall immediately report the failure to an appropriate state or federal law enforcement agency, or to both. B. Penalties. 1. In general, whoever violates subsection A shall be fined under this title or imprisoned for not more than 5 years, or both. 2. Intentional killing of child born alive. Whoever intentionally performs or attempts to perform an overt act that kills a child born alive described under subsection A shall be punished as under Section 1111 of this title for intentionally killing or attempting to kill a human being. C. Bar to prosecution. The mother of a child born alive described under subsection A may not be prosecuted under this section for conspiracy to violate this section, or for an offense under Section 3 or 4 of this title based on such a violation. D. Civil remedies. 1. Civil action by a woman on whom an abortion is performed. If a child is born alive and there is a violation of subsection A, the woman upon whom the abortion was performed or attempted may, in a civil action against any person who committed the violation, obtain appropriate relief. 2. Appropriate relief. Appropriate relief in a civil action under this subsection includes A. Objectively verifiable money damage for all injuries, psychological and physical, occasioned by the violation of subsection A. B. Statutory damages equal to 3 times the cost of the abortion or attempted abortion. And C. Punitive damages. 3. Attorney's fee for plaintiff. The court shall award a reasonable attorney's fee to a prevailing plaintiff in a civil action under this subsection. 4. Attorney's fee for defendant. If a defendant in a civil action under this subsection prevails and the court finds that the plaintiff's suit was frivolous, the court shall award a reasonable attorney's fee in favor of the defendant against the plaintiff. E. Definitions. In this section the following definitions apply. 1. Abortion. The term abortion means the use or prescription of any instrument, medicine, drug, or any other substance or device. A. To intentionally kill the unborn child of a woman known to be pregnant. Or B. To intentionally terminate the pregnancy of a woman known to be pregnant, with an intention other than I. After viability, to produce a live birth, and preserve the life and health of the child born alive. Or E. To remove a dead unborn child. 2. Attempt. The term attempt, with respect to an abortion, means conduct that, under the circumstances as the actor believes them to be, constitutes a substantial step in a course of conduct planned to culminate in performing an abortion. B. Clerical amendment. The table of sections for Chapter 74 of Title 18, United States Code, is amended by inserting after the item pertaining to Section 1531 the following. 1532. Requirements pertaining to born alive abortion survivors. C. Chapter heading amendments. 1. Chapter heading. In chapter. The chapter heading for Chapter 74 of Title 18, United States Code, is amended by striking partial birth abortions and inserting abortions. 2. Table of chapters for Part 1. The item relating to Chapter 74 in the table of chapters at the beginning of Part 1 of Title 18, United States Code, is amended by striking partial birth abortions and inserting abortions.
I think this bill would be relatively fine. I don't think that we need to really go into the arguments on this. I think this bill would be fine though. Um, all it's saying is that if it fails and there's still a living fetus, then it just deserves the right protections under the law that it would if it was born naturally. Um, yeah, let's go on to HR30. Oh, by the way, HR21 did pass the House. Um, so HR30 has also passed the House. And we're just going to go ahead and listen to this bill.
There are 3 versions. Text available as XML/HTML, XML/HTML, new window, 7 kilobytes, TXT, 4 kilobytes, PDF, 192 kilobytes. Formatting necessary for an accurate reading of this legislative text may be missing or may be shown by tags, for example, deleted, or bold, or may be missing from TXT display. Shown here, referred in Senate, January 17, 2025. 119th Congress First Session. H.R. 30. In the Senate of the United States, January 17, 2025. Received. Read twice and refer to the Committee on the Judiciary. ANACT. To amend the Immigration and Nationality Act to provide that aliens who have been convicted of or who have committed sex offenses or domestic violence are inadmissible and deportable. Be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America and Congress assembled. Section 1. Short title. This act may be cited as the Preventing Violence Against Women by Illegal Aliens Act. SEC. 2. Inadmissibility and deportability related to sex offenses, domestic violence, stalking, child abuse, or violation of protection order. A. Inadmissibility Section 212, A. 2, of the Immigration and Nationality Act, 8 U.S.C. 1182, A. 2, is amended by adding at the end the following. J. Sex offense is any alien who has been convicted of, who admits having committed, or who admits committing acts which constitute the essential elements of a sex offense, as such term is defined in Section 111, 5, of the Adam Walsh Child Protection and Safety Act of 2006, 34 U.S.C. 20911, 5, or a conspiracy to commit such an offense, is inadmissible. K. Domestic violence, stalking, child abuse, or violation of protection order any alien who has been convicted of, who admits having committed, or who admits committing acts which constitute the essential elements of I. A crime of domestic violence, as such term is defined in Section 237, A. 2, E. E. A crime of stalking, i.e., a crime of child abuse, child neglect, or child abandonment. Or, if, a crime of violating the portion of a protection order, as such term is defined in Section 237, A. 2, E. That involves protection against credible threats of violence, repeated harassment, or bodily injury to the person or persons for whom the protection order was issued, is inadmissible. B. Deportability Section 237, A. 2, of the Immigration and Nationality Act, 8 U.S.C. 1227, A. 2, is amended. 1. In subparagraph E. A. In the heading, by striking crimes against children, and inserting in crimes against children. And. Share this. B. In clause I, by inserting before the period at the end the following, and includes any crime that constitutes domestic violence, as such term is defined in Section 40,002, A, of the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act of 1994, 34 U.S.C. 12,291, regardless of whether the jurisdiction receives grant funding under that act. And. 2. By adding at the end the following. G. Sex offense is any alien who has been convicted of a sex offense, as such term is defined in Section 111, 5, of the Adam Walsh Child Protection and Safety Act of 2006, 34 U.S.C. 20,911, 5, or a conspiracy to commit such an offense, is deportable. Passed the House of Representatives January 16, 2025. Attest. Kevin F. McCumber, Clerk.
I think this bill would be fine and acceptable to pass. And this is with the understanding that I still want immigrants to come to this country. I just don't want criminals here. And if we can fix that problem, maybe we'll get to a point where the Republicans will lay off on the immigration a little bit. And I think that would be good for everyone. But we'll see what ends up happening with this bill. I mean, it did pass the House. It is on the way to the Senate. And we are going to go ahead and move on. This one? Yeah. If you look how long this bill is extremely long. That's why I'm not going to have this one inserted here. We are going to go straight to the next one and come back to this. Why do I have 30? It was 30. It's 33 this long. Why do I have 30? Oh, cool. It just snapped us back here. There's 30. Yep. Where did 33 go? We'll pull up 33 when we're done with this. All right, let's go to HR144. It did pass the House, so let's go ahead and listen to it, and then we'll hear my thoughts on it.
There are 3 versions. Text available as XML/HTML, XML/HTML, new window, 5 kilobytes, TXT, 3 kilobytes, PDF, 191 kilobytes. Formatting necessary for an accurate reading of this legislative text may be missing or may be shown by tags, for example, deleted, or bold, or may be missing from TXT display. Shown here, referred in Senate, January 16, 2025. 119th Congress, first session. H.R. 144. In the Senate of the United States, January 16, 2025. Received. Read twice and refer to the Committee on Environment and Public Works. ANACT. To provide that the Federal Reports Elimination and Sunset Act of 1995 does not apply to certain reports required to be submitted by the Tennessee Valley Authority, and for other purposes. Be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America and Congress assembled. Section 1. Short title. This act may be cited as a Tennessee Valley Authority Salary Transparency Act. SEC. 2. Salary disclosure. Exception to report elimination. Section 9 of the Tennessee Valley Authority Act of 1933, 16 U.S.C. 831 hours, is amended. 1. In subsection, by striking a financial statement and all that follows through $1,500 a year and inserting a report of the total number of employees at the management level or above, to include all executives and board members, that shall include the names, salaries, and duties of such employees that are receiving compensation at or greater than the maximum rate of basic pay for grade GS-15 of the general schedule. 2. By striking all that precedes the board shall and inserting the following. SEC. 9. Financial reporting. A. Report on compensation. 1. In general. And 3. In subsection, by adding at the end the following. 2. Exemption. The information concerning salaries of employees of the corporation contained in, or filed with, the report described in paragraph 1, is exempt from A. Disclosure under Section 552, B. 3, of Title 5, United States Code, and B. The requirements of the Access to Congressionally Mandated Reports Act, Public Law 117-263. Passed the House of Representatives January 15, 2025. Attest. Kevin F. McCumber, Clerk.
I personally don't really care if this bill passes or not. It's just another salary disclosure uh, exemption to report elimination. So they are allowing it to go private, it sounds like. So, hmm, okay, yeah, no, that's fine. I'd pass this. The House also passed this. Um, it passed with 423 to 0. So pretty much everyone agreed on it. Let's go to the next bill. And we got HR 164, Power Act of 2025. Let's go ahead, give it a listen. The House did pass this.
There are 3 versions. Text available as XML/HTML, XML/HTML, new window, 4 kilobytes, TXT, 2 kilobytes, PDF, 191 kilobytes. Formatting necessary for an accurate reading of this legislative text may be missing or may be shown by tags, for example, deleted, or bold, or may be missing from TXT display. Shown here, referred in Senate, January 16, 2025. 119th Congress, first session. H.R. 164. In the Senate of the United States, January 16, 2025. Received. Read twice and refer to the Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs. ANACT. To amend the Robert T. Stafford Disaster Relief and Emergency Assistance Act to authorize federal agencies to provide certain essential assistance for hazard mitigation for electric utilities, and for other purposes. Be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America and Congress assembled. Section 1. Short title. This act may be cited as the Promoting Opportunities to Widen Electrical Resilience Act of 2025 or the Power Act of 2025. SEC. 2. Essential assistance. A. In general, Section 403 of the Robert T. Stafford Disaster Relief and Emergency Assistance Act, 42 U.S.C. 5170 bits, is amended by adding at the end the following. E. Electric utilities. 1. Hazard mitigation activities. An electric utility may carry out cost-effective hazard mitigation activities jointly or otherwise in combination with activities for the restoration of power carried out with assistance provided under this section. 2. Eligibility for additional assistance. In any case in which an electric utility facility receives assistance under this section for the emergency restoration of power, the receipt of such assistance shall not render such facility ineligible for any hazard mitigation assistance under Section 406 for which such facility is otherwise eligible. B. Applicability. The amendment made by subsection A shall only apply to amounts appropriated on or after the date of enactment of this act. Passed the House of Representatives January 15, 2025. Attest. Kevin F. McCumber, Clerk.
I think I would go ahead and pass this bill. I mean, Our House also passed it. It passed 419 to 2. So this was definitely bipartisan. Uh, so let's move on to 165. Uh, yeah, we'll just let you guys listen to this.
There is one version of the bill. Text available as XML/HTML. XML/HTML. New window. 8 kilobytes. TXT. 5 kilobytes. PDF. 111 kilobytes. Formatting necessary for an accurate reading of this legislative text may be missing or may be shown by tags. For example, deleted, or bold, or may be missing from TXT display. Shown here, engrossed in House, January 22, 2025. 119th Congress First Session. HR 165. ANACT. To direct the Secretary of the Interior to complete all actions necessary for certain land to be held in restricted fee status by the Oglala Sioux Tribe and Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe, and for other purposes. Be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America and Congress assembled. Section 1. Short title. This act may be cited as a Wounded Knee Massacre Memorial and Sacred Site Act. SEC. 2. Definitions. In this act. 1. Restricted fee status. The term restricted fee status means a status in which the tribal land A. shall continue to be owned by the tribes. B. shall be part of the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation and expressly made subject to the civil and criminal jurisdiction of the Oglala Sioux Tribe. C. shall not be transferred without the consent of Congress and the tribes. D. shall not be subject to taxation by a state or local government. And E. shall not be subject to any provision of law providing for the review or approval by the Secretary of the Interior before the tribes may use the land for any purpose as allowed by the document titled Covenant between the Oglala Sioux Tribe and the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe and dated October 21, 2022, directly, or through agreement with another party. 2. Secretary. The term Secretary means the Secretary of the Interior. 3. Tribal land. The term tribal land means the approximately 40 acres, including the surface and subsurface estate, and mineral estate, and any and all improvements, structures, and personal property on those acres, on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in Oglala, Lakota County, at Rural County Road 4, Wounded Knee, South Dakota, and generally depicted as area of interest on the map entitled Wounded Knee Sacred Site and Memorial Land and dated October 26, 2022, which is a segment of the December 29, 1890, Wounded Knee Massacre Site. 4. Tribes. The term tribes means the Oglala Sioux Tribe and Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe of the Cheyenne River Reservation, both tribes being among the constituent tribes of the Great Sioux Nation and signatories to the Fort Laramie Treaty of 1868 between the United States of America and the Great Sioux Nation. 15 Stat. 635. SEC. 3. Land held in restricted fee status by the tribes. A. Action by Secretary not later than 365 days after enactment of this act. The Secretary shall 1. Complete all actions, including documentation and minor corrections to the survey and legal description of tribal land, necessary for the tribal land to be held by the tribes in restricted fee status. And 2. Appropriately assign each applicable private and municipal utility and service right or agreement with regard to the tribal land. B. Conditions. 1. Federal laws relating to Indian land except as otherwise provided in this act. The tribal land shall be subject to federal laws relating to Indian country, as defined by Section 1151 of Title 18, United States Code and protected by the restriction against alienation in Section 177 of Title 25, United States Code. 2. U.S.E. of land. The tribal land shall be used for the purposes allowed by the document titled Covenant between the Oglala Sioux Tribe and the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe and dated October 21, 2022. 3. Encumbrances and agreements. The tribal land shall remain subject to any private or municipal encumbrance, right-of-way, restriction, easement of record, or utility service agreement in effect on the date of the enactment of this act. 4. Gaming pursuant to the document titled Covenant between the Oglala Sioux Tribe and the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe and dated October 21, 2022. The tribal land shall not be used for gaming activity under the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act, 25 U.S.C. 2701 as sec. Passed the House of Representatives January 22, 2025. Attest. Clerk. 119th Congress First Session. HR 165. ANACT. To direct the Secretary of the Interior to complete all actions necessary for certain land to be held in restricted fee status by the Oglala Sioux Tribe and Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe, and for other purposes.
Yeah, I mean, that should be obvious thing to pass. We're going to go look at the roll call. Do 416 to 0. I mean, that's pretty partisan. Yeah. And rightfully so. I mean, let the tribe have that land. Honestly, in my opinion, most tribes don't have enough land. But that's just that's just in my personal opinion. And we're gonna go to 186. It did pass the House, so we're gonna go ahead and let it play.
There are two versions. Text available as XML/HTML. XML/HTML, new window, 7 kilobytes. TXT, 4 kilobytes. PDF, 192 kilobytes. Formatting necessary for an accurate reading of this legislative text may be missing or may be shown by tags, for example, deleted, or bold, or may be missing from TXT display. Shown here, referred in Senate, January 22, 2025. 119th Congress First Session. HR 186. In the Senate of the United States, January 22, 2025. Received. Read twice and refer to the Committee on Energy and Natural Resources. ANACT. To authorize the National Medal of Honor Museum Foundation to establish a commemorative work on the National Mall to honor the extraordinary acts of valor, selfless service, and sacrifice displayed by Medal of Honor recipients. Be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America and Congress assembled. Section 1. Short title. This act may be cited as the Herschel Woody Williams National Medal of Honor Monument Location Act. SEC. Findings. Congress finds the following. 1. Congress in 2021 unanimously passed, and the President signed, Public Law 117-80, 40 U.S.C. 8903 Note, which authorized the National Medal of Honor Museum Foundation to establish on federal land in the District of Columbia a commemorative work to honor the acts of valor, selfless service, and sacrifice displayed by Medal of Honor recipients. 2. The Medal of Honor was established by President Abraham Lincoln and first awarded 160 years ago on March 25, 1863, and is part of Lincoln's lasting and living legacy. 3. In 1991, during the administration of President George H.W. Bush, this legacy was extended further when National Medal of Honor Day was established as March 25th of each year. 4. The Medal of Honor is awarded to all branches of the United States Armed Forces as our nation's highest recognition for valor in combat. 5. The number of living Medal of Honor recipients has been steadily declining, making it even more crucial to honor and recognize their heroic sacrifices and inspire future generations. 6. Herschel Woody Williams, the last World War II Medal of Honor recipient, passed away in 2022 and laid in honor at the United States Capitol. 7. The Medal of Honor represents the very best of our nation ordinary citizens, who took extraordinary action above and beyond the call of duty and became heroes of our republic. 8. These examples inspire all citizens and ignite within us the very spirit of America. 9. The Medal of Honor rises to the level of supreme national and historical importance necessary to warrant representation on the National Mall. 10. Locating the National Medal of Honor monument in close proximity to the Lincoln Memorial within the reserve would be a respectful extension of his enduring legacy and recognition of what ordinary people can accomplish when working for the greater good. SEC. 3. National Medal of Honor monument location. A. Site notwithstanding Section 8908, C, of Title 40, United States Code, the commemorative work authorized by Section 1, A, of Public Law 117-80, 40 U.S.C. 8903 Note, shall be located within the reserve, as defined in Section 8902, A, of Title 40, United States Code. B. Applicability of Commemorative Works Act except as provided in subsection A, Chapter 89 of Title 40, United States Code, commonly known as the Commemorative Works Act, shall apply to the commemorative work. Passed the House of Representatives January 21, 2025. Attest. Kevin F. McCumber, Clerk.
Yeah, we should definitely be passing this. I mean, let's honor our Medal of Honor recipients as best we can. All veterans deserve recognition, especially those with the Medal of Honor. This passed the House with 414-0. So very unanimous. Very bipartisan. And then we have 187, Map Waters Act of 2025. This passed the House. Let's go ahead and give it a listen.
There are two versions. Text available as XML/HTML. XML/HTML, new window, 18 kilobytes. TXT, 11 kilobytes. PDF, 201 kilobytes. Formatting necessary for an accurate reading of this legislative text may be missing or may be shown by tags, for example, deleted, or bold, or may be missing from TXT display. Shown here, referred in Senate, January 22, 2025. 119th Congress First Session. HR 187. In the Senate of the United States. January 22, 2025. Received. Read twice and refer to the Committee on Energy and Natural Resources. ANACT. To provide for the standardization, consolidation, and publication of data relating to public outdoor recreational use of federal waterways among federal land and water management agencies, and for other purposes. Be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America and Congress assembled. Section 1. Short title. This act may be cited as the Modernizing Access to Our Public Waters Act of 2025 or the Map Waters Act of 2025. SEC. 2. Definitions. In this act. 1. Federal fishing restriction. The term federal fishing restriction means a defined area in which all or certain fishing activities are temporarily or permanently prohibited or restricted by a federal land or water management agency. 2. Federal Land or Water Management Agency. The term Federal Land or Water Management Agency means A. The Bureau of Reclamation. B. The National Park Service. C. The Bureau of Land Management. D. The United States Fish and Wildlife Service. And E. The Forest Service. 3. Federal Waterway. The term Federal Waterway means waters managed by one or more of the relevant secretaries. 4. Federal Waterway Restriction. The term Federal Waterway Restriction means a restriction on the access or use of a federal waterway applied under applicable law by one or more of the secretaries. 5. Secretaries. The term Secretaries means A. The Secretary of Agriculture, acting through the Chief of the Forest Service. And B. The Secretary of the Interior. 6. State. The term state means each of the several states, the District of Columbia, and each territory of the United States. SEC. 3. Interagency data standardization. Not later than 30 months after the date of enactment of this act, the Secretaries, in coordination with the Federal Geographic Data Committee established by Section 753A of the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2018, 43 U.S.C. 2802, shall jointly develop and adopt interagency standards to ensure compatibility and interoperability among applicable federal databases with respect to the collection and dissemination of geospatial data relating to public outdoor recreational access of federal waterways and federal fishing restrictions. SEC. 4. Data consolidation and publication. A. Federal waterway restrictions not later than 5 years after the date of enactment of this act. Each of the secretaries, to the maximum extent practicable, shall digitize and make publicly available online, as applicable, geographic information system data that includes, with respect to federal waterway restrictions. 1. Status information with respect to the conditions under which federal waterways are open or closed to entry or watercraft, including watercraft inspection, decontamination requirements, low elevation aircraft, or diving. 2. The dates on which federal waterways are seasonally closed to entry or watercraft. 3. The areas of federal waterways with restrictions on motorized propulsion, horsepower, or fuel type. 4. The areas of federal waterways with anchoring restrictions, no-wake zones, exclusion zones, danger areas, or vessel speed restrictions. 5. Federal waterway restrictions on the direction of travel, including upstream or downstream travel. And 6. The uses, including by watercraft, that are restricted on each area of a federal waterway, including the permissibility of A. Canoes and other paddlecraft. B. Rafts and drift boats. C. Motorboats. D. Personal watercraft. E. Airboats. F. Amphibious aircraft. G. Hovercraft. H. Over snow vehicles and other motorized vehicles on frozen bodies of water. I. Ocean-going ships. J. Swimming. And K. Other applicable recreational activities, as determined to be appropriate by the secretaries. B. Federal waterway access and navigation information not later than 5 years after the date of enactment of this act. Each of the secretaries, to the maximum extent practicable, shall digitize and make publicly available online, as applicable, geographic information system data that includes, with respect to federal waterway access and navigation information. 1. A. The location of boat ramps, portages, and fishing access sites under the authority of the Federal Land or Water Management Agency. And B. The identification of the dates on which the facilities and sites identified under subparagraph A are open or closed, as applicable. And 2. Bathymetric information and depth charts, as feasible. C. Federal fishing restrictions not later than 5 years after the date of enactment of this act. Each of the secretaries, to the maximum extent practicable, shall digitize and make publicly available online geographic information system data that describes, with respect to federal fishing restrictions. 1. The location and geographic boundaries of federal fishing restrictions on recreational and commercial fishing, including A. Full or partial closures. B. No-take zones. And C. Federal fishing restrictions within or surrounding marine protected areas. 2. Federal fishing restrictions on the use of specific types of equipment or bait. And 3. Federal requirements with respect to catch and release. D. Public comment. The secretaries shall develop a process to allow members of the public to submit questions or comments regarding the information described in subsections A and B. E. Updates. The secretaries, to the maximum extent practicable, shall update 1. The data described in subsections A and B, not less frequently than 2 times per year. And 2. The data described in subsection C, in real time as changes go into effect. F. Exclusion. This section shall not apply to irrigation canals and flowage easements. G. Disclosure. Any geographic information system data made publicly available under this section shall not disclose information regarding the nature, location, character, or ownership of historic, paleontological, or archaeological resources, consistent with applicable law. SEC. 5. Cooperation and coordination. A. Community partners and third-party providers. For purposes of carrying out this act, the secretaries may 1. Coordinate and partner with non-federal agencies and private sector and non-profit partners, including A. State natural resource agencies. B. Tribal natural resource agencies. C. Technology companies. D. Geospatial data companies. And E. Experts in data science, analytics, and operations research. And 2. Enter into an agreement with a third party to carry out any provision of this act. B. United States Geological Survey. The secretaries may work with the director of the United States Geological Survey to collect, aggregate, digitize, standardize, and publish data on behalf of the secretaries to meet the requirements of this act. C. Requirement with respect to data developed and distributed under this act. The secretary shall 1. Develop the data in accordance with applicable federal, state, and tribal laws, including regulations. And 2. Include a notice that any geospatial data are subject to applicable federal, state, and tribal laws, including regulations. D. Existing efforts. To the extent practicable, the secretary concerned shall use or incorporate existing applicable data, maps, and resources in carrying out this act, including data, maps, and resources developed and published under 1. The Modernizing Access to Our Public Land Act, 16 U.S.C. 6851 as Sec. 2. Section 103 of Division D of the Consolidated Appropriations Act, 2023, 43 U.S.C. 776. Or 3. Other applicable law. SEC. 6. Reports. Not later than 1 year after the date of enactment of this act and annually thereafter through March 30th, 2034, the secretary shall submit a report that describes the progress made by the secretaries with respect to meeting the requirements of this act to 1. The Committee on Natural Resources of the House of Representatives. 2. The Committee on Energy and Commerce of the House of Representatives. 3. The Committee on Agriculture of the House of Representatives. 4. The Committee on Energy and Natural Resources of the Senate. And 5. The Committee on Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry of the Senate. SEC. 7. Effect. Nothing in this act 1. Modifies or alters the definition of the term navigable waters under federal law. 2. Affects the jurisdiction or authority of state or federal agencies to regulate navigable waters. 3. Modifies or alters the authority or jurisdiction of federal or state agencies to manage fisheries. Or 4. Authorizes or is intended to result in a change in the accessibility of waters open to hunting, fishing, or other forms of outdoor recreation as of the date of the enactment of this act. Passed the House of Representatives January 21, 2025. Attest. Kevin F. McCumber, Clerk.
Yeah, I mean, why wouldn't anyone want to pass this? It's just allowing people access to more waterways, uh, primarily for recreation, it seems like. Um, yeah, let's do it. Maybe it'll help boost some morale in some of those areas. Uh, this passed in the House with a 413 to 0 margin. Dang. That's yeah, definitely bipartisan support there. So let's go to 197. This bill also passed the House. We're going to go ahead and listen to it.
There are 2 versions. Text available as XML/HTML. XML/HTML, new window, 11 kilobytes. TXT, 7 kilobytes. PDF, 197 kilobytes. Formatting necessary for an accurate reading of this legislative text may be missing or may be shown by tags, for example, deleted, or bold, or may be missing from TXT display. Shown here, referred in Senate, January 22, 2025. 119th Congress, first session. H.R. 197. In the Senate of the United States, January 22, 2025. Received. Read twice and refer to the Committee on Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry. ANACT. To provide for a land exchange in the Chippewa National Forest, Minnesota, and for other purposes. Be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America and Congress assembled. Section 1. Short title. This act may be cited as a Lake Winnebagoish Land Exchange Act of 2025. SEC. 2. Definitions. In this act, 1. BWLT. The term BWLT means Big Winnie Land and Timber, LLC, a Minnesota limited liability corporation. Share this. 2. MAP. The term MAP means the map entitled High Land Exchange and dated December 14, 2023. 3. Federal land. The term federal land means the approximately 17.5 acres of federal land in Itasca County, Minnesota, generally depicted as the federal parcel on the map. 4. NON. Federal land. The term non-federal land means the approximately 36.7 acres of non-federal land in Itasca County, Minnesota, generally depicted as the non-federal parcel on the map. 5. Secretary. The term secretary means the Secretary of Agriculture, acting through the Chief of the Forest Service. SEC. 3. Exchange of land. A. Exchange authorized subject to the provisions of this act. If BWLT offers to convey the non-federal land to the United States, the Secretary shall, not later than 1 year after the date on which such offer is made. 1. Accept the offer. 2. Convey to BWLT all right, title, and interest of the United States and into the federal land, accepting, and reserving an easement for road access to National Forest System land west of the federal parcel. And 3. Accept from BWLT all right, title, and interest of BWLT and into the non-federal land. B. Requirements. The exchange under subsection A shall be 1. Conditioned on title approval for the non-federal land by the Secretary in accordance with subsection E. 2. Conditioned on a cash equalization payment made by BWLT to the United States in accordance with subsection C. If, under the appraisals conducted in accordance with this act, it is determined that the value of the federal land exceeds the value of the non-federal land. 3. Conditioned on the satisfactory completion of a Phase 1 environmental site assessment by BWLT, provided to the Secretary, in advance of the acceptance of the non-federal parcel. 4. Subject to valid existing rights. And 5. Subject to any other terms and conditions the Secretary determines appropriate. C. Equal value and cash equalization. 1. In general except as provided in paragraph 2, the exchange under subsection A shall be for equal value or the values shall be equalized by a cash payment. 2. Exception notwithstanding any other provision of law, if the appraised value of the non-federal land to be conveyed to the United States exceeds the appraised value of the federal land, a cash equalization payment by the United States to BWLT is hereby waived and the amount of such waived payment shall be considered a donation by BWLT to the United States for all purposes of law. D. Appraisals. 1. In general, the value of the land to be exchanged under this act shall be determined by appraisals conducted by an independent and qualified appraiser mutually agreed to by the Secretary and BWLT. 2. Appraisal standards. The Secretary shall complete appraisals of the land to be exchanged under this act in accordance with A. The Uniform Appraisal Standards for Federal Land Acquisitions. And B. The Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice. E. Format title to the non-federal land to be conveyed to the United States under this act shall be found sufficient by the Secretary pursuant to Section 3111 of Title 40, United States Code. F. Management of acquired land. The non-federal land acquired by the United States under subsection A shall be 1. Added to, and managed as part of, the Chippewa National Forest. And 2. Managed in accordance with the laws, rules, and regulations pertaining to National Forest System lands. G. Map and legal descriptions. 1. In general, as soon as practicable after the date of enactment of this act, the Secretary shall finalize the map and legal descriptions of all land to be conveyed under this act. 2. Controlling document. In the case of a discrepancy between the map and a legal description, the map shall control. 3. Corrections. The Secretary and BWLT, by mutual agreement, may correct any minor errors in the map or in the legal descriptions, including with respect to the boundaries of the federal land and the non-federal land. 4. MAP on file. The map and legal descriptions shall be on file and available for public inspection in appropriate offices of the Forest Service. H. Closing costs. As a condition for the exchange under subsection A, BWLT shall pay all closing costs associated with the exchange, including for 1. Title insurance and title search. 2. Any applicable inspection fees, escrow fees, attorney's fees, and recording fees. And 3. Any environmental analysis or resource survey required under federal law, regulation, or policy, including a Phase 1 environmental site assessment of the non-federal land. I. Survey. 1. In general, the exact acreages and legal descriptions of the federal and non-federal land to be exchanged under subsection A shall be determined by surveys satisfactory to the Secretary. 2. Costs of survey. BWLT shall bear all costs associated with the surveys under paragraph 1. Pass the House of Representatives January 21, 2025. Attest. Kevin F. McCumber, Clerk.
Yeah, I think this bill is relatively fine. Let's see here. It passed the House. I'm not seeing the actual vote here is looks like the vote let's see. Consider under suspension of the rules. Looks like 242 to 44. Okay. Oh, that's what rules they're referencing, I think. Yeah. Not seeing the actual vote. Alright. Sad we can't see the actual vote on that one, but let's go ahead and move on to our next one. We got a 204 Acres Act.
There are two versions. Text available as XML/HTML. XML/HTML, new window, 11 kilobytes. TXT, 8 kilobytes. PDF, 197 kilobytes. Formatting necessary for an accurate reading of this legislative text may be missing or may be shown by tags, for example, deleted, or bold, or may be missing from TXT display. Shown here, referred in Senate, January 22, 2025. 119th Congress, First Session. H.R. 204. In the Senate of the United States. January 22, 2025. Received. Read twice and refer to the Committee on Energy and Natural Resources. ANACT. to require that the Secretary of Agriculture and the Secretary of the Interior submit accurate reports regarding hazardous fuels reduction activities, and for other purposes. Be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America and Congress assembled. Section 1. Short title. This act may be cited as the Accurately Counting Risk Elimination Solutions Act or the ACRES Act. SEC. 2. Accurate hazardous fuels reduction reports. A. Inclusion of hazardous fuels reduction report and materials submitted in support of the President's budget. 1. In general, beginning with the first fiscal year that begins after the date of the enactment of this Act, and each fiscal year thereafter, the Secretary concerned shall include in the materials submitted in support of the President's budget pursuant to Section 1105 of Title 31, United States Code, a report on the number of acres of federal land on which the Secretary concerned carried out hazardous fuels reduction activities during the preceding fiscal year. 2. Requirements for purposes of the report required under paragraph 1. The Secretary concerned shall A. In determining the number of acres of federal land on which the Secretary concerned carried out hazardous fuels reduction activities during the period covered by the report. I. Record acres of federal land on which hazardous fuels reduction activities were completed during such period. And E. Record each acre described in clause I, once in the report, regardless of whether multiple hazardous fuels reduction activities were carried out on such acre during such period. And B. With respect to the acres of federal land recorded in the report, include information on I, which such acres are located in the wildland-urban interface. E. The level of wildfire risk, high, moderate, or low, on the first and last day of the period covered by the report. I.e., the types of hazardous fuels activities completed for such acres, delineating between whether such activities were conducted I. In a wildfire managed for resource benefits. Or the second, through a planned project. If the cost per acre of hazardous fuels activities carried out during the period covered by the report. B. The region or system unit in which the acres are located. And I. The effectiveness of the hazardous fuels reduction activities on reducing the risk of wildfire. 3. Transparency. The Secretary concerned shall make each report submitted under paragraph 1 publicly available on the website of the Department of Agriculture and the Department of the Interior, as applicable. B. Accurate data collection. 1. In general, not later than 90 days after the date of the enactment of this Act, the Secretary concerned shall implement standardized procedures for tracking data related to hazardous fuels reduction activities carried out by the Secretary concerned. 2. Elements. The standardized procedures required under paragraph 1 shall include A. Regular, standardized data reviews of the accuracy and timely input of data used to track hazardous fuels reduction activities. B. Verification methods that validate whether such data accurately correlates to the hazardous fuels reduction activities carried out by the Secretary concerned. C. An analysis of the short and long-term effectiveness of the hazardous fuels reduction activities on reducing the risk of wildfire. And D. For hazardous fuels reduction activities that occur partially within the wildland-urban interface, methods to distinguish which acres are located within the wildland-urban interface and which acres are located outside the wildland-urban interface. 3. Report not later than 2 weeks after implementing the standardized procedures required under paragraph 1. The Secretary concerned shall submit to Congress a report that describes A. Such standardized procedures. And B. Program and policy recommendations to Congress to address any limitations in tracking data related to hazardous fuels reduction activities under this subsection. C. GAO study not later than 2 years after the date of enactment of this Act. The Comptroller General of the United States shall 1. Conduct a study on the implementation of this Act, including any limitations with respect to A. Reporting hazardous fuels reduction activities under subsection A. Or B. Tracking data related to hazardous fuels reduction activities under subsection B. And 2. Submit to Congress a report that describes the results of the study under paragraph 1. D. Definitions in this Act. 1. Hazardous fuels reduction activity. The term hazardous fuels reduction activity A. Means any vegetation management activity to reduce the risk of wildfire, including mechanical treatments and prescribed burning. And B. Does not include the awarding of contracts to conduct hazardous fuels reduction activities. 2. Federal lands. The term federal lands means lands under the jurisdiction of the Secretary of the Interior or the Secretary of Agriculture. 3. Secretary concerned. The term Secretary concerned means A. The Secretary of Agriculture, with respect to National Forest System lands. And B. The Secretary of the Interior, with respect to public lands and units of the National Park System. 4. Wildland-urban interface. The term wildland-urban interface has a meaning given the term in Section 101 of the Healthy Forest Restoration Act of 2003, 16 U.S.C. 6511. E. No additional funds authorized. No additional funds are authorized to carry out the requirements of this Act, and the activities authorized by this Act are subject to the availability of appropriations made in advance for such purposes. Passed the House of Representatives January 21, 2025. Attest. Kevin F. McCumber, Clerk.
Yeah, no, I see no reason why this wouldn't pass. It's just a reporting bill. It's not really anything major, and it doesn't look like I'm gonna have the count. So yeah, let's go ahead and move on to our next bill. Only got 4 more and then the long one, making 5. By the way, I found out what happened to it. It went over to my other screen. uh, 207, it passed the House. Let's just go ahead and give it a listen real quick.
There are 2 versions. Text available as XML/HTML. XML/HTML, new window, 9 kilobytes. TXT, 7 kilobytes. PDF, 195 kilobytes. Formatting necessary for an accurate reading of this legislative text may be missing or may be shown by tags, for example, deleted, or bold, or may be missing from TXT display. Shown here, referred in Senate, January 22, 2025. 119th Congress, First Session. HR. 207. In the Senate of the United States. January 22, 2025. Received. Read twice and refer to the Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation. ANACT. To direct the Secretary of Commerce to establish a task force regarding shark depredation, and for other purposes. Be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America and Congress assembled. Section 1. Short title. This act may be cited as the Supporting the Health of Aquatic Systems Through Research Knowledge and Enhanced Dialogue Act of 2025 or the Shark Act of 2025. SEC. 2. Shark Depredation Task Force and Research Projects. A. Shark Depredation Task Force. 1. In general, the Secretary of Commerce shall establish a task force, referred to in this subsection as that task force, to identify and address critical needs with respect to shark depredation. 2. Membership. The Secretary of Commerce shall appoint individuals to the task force, including a. 1 representative from each regional fishery management council established under Section 302 1 of the Magnuson-Stevens Fishery Conservation and Management Act, 16 U.S.C. 1852 1 each Marine Fisheries Commission, as such term is defined in Section 3 of the Magnuson-Stevens Fishery Conservation and Management Act, 16 U.S.C. 1802, i.e., the Fish and Wildlife Agency of a coastal state from each regional fishery management council established under Section 302 1 of the Magnuson-Stevens Fishery Conservation and Management Act, 16 U.S.C. 1852 1 and if the National Marine Fisheries Service b. An individual with expertise in the management of highly migratory species, c. A researcher with expertise in shark management and behavior, and d. A researcher with expertise in shark ecology. 3. Responsibilities. The task force shall a. Develop ways to improve coordination and communication across the fisheries management community and shark research community to address shark depredation. b. Identify research priorities and funding opportunities for such priorities, including identifying shark species involved in interactions. e. Shark stock assessments, i.e., how sharks become habituated to humans and thus lead to more interactions between sharks and humans. if. How angler behavior and fishery regulatory frameworks may influence shark interactions. b. Techniques and strategies to reduce harmful interactions between sharks and humans, including the development and use of non-lethal deterrents. 5. The role of healthy shark populations in the ocean food web. And i. Climate change impacts on shifting shark populations, prey, and shark behavior. c. Develop recommended management strategies to address shark depredation. And d. Coordinate the development and distribution of educational materials to help the fishing community minimize shark interactions, including through changed angler behavior and expectations. 4. Report not later than 2 years after the date of the enactment of this section, and every 2 years thereafter until the termination of the task force in accordance with paragraph 5. The task force shall submit to Congress a report regarding the findings of the task force. 5. Sunset. The task force shall terminate not later than 7 years after the date on which the Secretary of Commerce establishes the task force. 6. Coastal state. Defined in this subsection, the term coastal state a. Means a state of the United States in, or bordering on, the Atlantic Ocean, Pacific Ocean, Arctic Ocean, Gulf of Mexico, or Long Island Sound. And b. Includes Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands of the United States, Guam, the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, and American Samoa. b. Shark Depredation Research Projects. Section 318 c. of the Magnuson-Stevens Fishery Conservation and Management Act, 16 U.S.C. 1867 c. is amended by adding at the end the following. 6. Projects to better understand shark depredation, including identifying what causes increases in shark depredation, and determining how to best address shark depredation. c. In fact, nothing in this section shall be construed to affect the authority and responsibility of the Secretary of Commerce in carrying out the Endangered Species Act of 1973, 16 U.S.C. 1351 as sec, or the Magnuson-Stevens Fishery Conservation and Management Act, 16 U.S.C. 1801 as sec. Passed the House of Representatives January 21, 2025. Attest. Kevin F. McCumber, Clerk.
Yes, so this is pretty much a wildlife conservation bill. I like it. I would pass it. There is no roll call vote, so I can't tell you who voted for what or anything like that. So we're just going to move on to our next one here. It does have a roll call vote, so we will get to that. It did pass the House. It is going to be HR 375. And we're going to go ahead and let you guys listen to it.
There is one version of the bill. Text available as XML/HTML. XML/HTML. New window. 5 kilobytes. TXT. 3 kilobytes. PDF. 103 kilobytes. Formatting necessary for an accurate reading of this legislative text may be missing or may be shown by tags, for example, deleted, or bold, or may be missing from TXT display. Shown here, engrossed in House, January 23, 2025. 119th Congress, First Session. HR 375 ANACT. To require the Secretary of the Interior to partner and collaborate with the Secretary of Agriculture and the State of Hawaii to address rapid Ohio death, and for other purposes. Be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America and Congress assembled. Section 1. Short title. This act may be cited as a Continued Rapid Ohio Death Response Act of 2025. SEC. 2. Definitions. In this act. 1. Rapid Ohio death. The term rapid Ohio death means a disease caused by the fungal pathogen known as Ceratocystis fimbriata that affects the tree of the species Megrosideros polymorpha. 2. State. The term state means the state of Hawaii. SEC. 3. Collaboration. The Secretary of the Interior shall partner and collaborate with the Secretary of Agriculture and the state to address rapid Ohio death. SEC. 4. Sustained efforts. A. Transmission. The Secretary of the Interior, acting through the Director of the United States Geological Survey, and the Chief of the Forest Service, acting through the Forest Service Institute of Pacific Islands Forestry, shall continue to conduct research on rapid Ohio death vectors and transmission. B. Ungulate management. The Secretary of the Interior, acting through the Director of the United States Fish and Wildlife Service, shall continue to partner with the Secretary of Agriculture, the state, and with local stakeholders to manage ungulates in rapid Ohio death control areas on federal, state, and private land, with the consent of private landowners. C. Restoration and research. The Secretary of Agriculture, acting through the Chief of the Forest Service, shall continue to provide 1. Financial assistance, including through agreements with the Secretary of the Interior. A. To prevent the spread of rapid Ohio death. And B. To restore the native forests of the state. And 2. Staff and necessary infrastructure funding to the Institute of Pacific Islands Forestry to conduct research on rapid Ohio death. Passed the House of Representatives January 23, 2025. Attest. Clerk. 119th Congress, First Session. HR 375 ANACT. To require the Secretary of the Interior to partner and collaborate with the Secretary of Agriculture and the state of Hawaii to address rapid Ohio death, and for other purposes.
I think this is a pretty clear one to pass as well. The roll call vote, I mean, 359 to 62. I feel like it should have passed better than that, but that is what it is. Do we actually, what happens if I go here? All right, so we can see that all 62 nays came from the Republican Party. Ooh, and we can actually um, see all the no's. Just scroll down and you can look at all 62 that said no. So if you're ever interested, you now know how you can see who voted for what when they do roll call votes. So we're just going to move on here to HR471, fix our Forest Act. This one did pass. It does have a roll call vote, so we will get to that. Let's go ahead and start the reading of this bill. I believe this is, it's a little long. Yeah, this one's really long. We're going to go ahead and move this one back. Think this one might actually be longer than that other bill. So we're going to move this one to the very back behind HR 33. So we're just going to move right along over here to Senate 5. So this bill is actually the Lack and Riley Act. It originally passed the House. It went to the Senate. It got changed in the Senate and then passed the Senate. So now it's kicked back to the House. The House passed this, and now it is actually sitting on the president's desk already. So we will see if Trump will sign this into law or not. He should. It fits his agenda, um, at least part of his agenda, and it's a part of the agenda that a lot of people agree with. Um, there were 8 roll call votes on this bill. I believe this is probably just them trying to get over the 2/3. You can see here that all 156 no's came from the Democratic Party. And I understand the controversy over this bill. So we will kind of discuss the controversy after I let you guys listen to it again so you can hear whatever changes were made.
There are 3 versions. Text available as XML/HTML, XML/HTML, new window, 18 kilobytes, TXT, 9 kilobytes, PDF, 188 kilobytes. Formatting necessary for an accurate reading of this legislative text may be missing or may be shown by tags, for example, deleted, or bold, or may be missing from TXT display. Shown here, Enrolled Bill, S. 5. AT the first session. Begun and held at the City of Washington on Friday, the 3rd day of January, 2025. To require the Secretary of Homeland Security to take into custody aliens who have been charged in the United States with theft, and for other purposes. Be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America and Congress assembled. Section 1. Short title. This act may be cited as the Lack and Riley Act. SEC. 2. Detention of certain aliens who commit theft. Section 236, C, of the Immigration and Nationality Act, 8 U.S.C. 1226, C, is amended. 1. In paragraph 1. A. In subparagraph C, by striking or B. In subparagraph D, by striking the comma at the end and inserting or and C, by inserting after subparagraph D, the following. E. I is inadmissible under paragraph 6, 6, C, or 7 of section 212, A. And E is charged with, is arrested for, is convicted of, admits having committed, or admits committing acts which constitute the essential elements of any burglary, theft, larceny, shoplifting, or assault of a law enforcement officer offense, or any crime that results in death or serious bodily injury to another person. 2. By redesignating paragraph 2 as paragraph 4. And 3. By inserting after paragraph 1 the following. 2. Definition for purposes of paragraph 1. E. The terms burglary, theft, larceny, shoplifting, assault of a law enforcement officer, and serious bodily injury have the meanings given such terms in the jurisdiction in which the acts occurred. 3. Detainer the Secretary of Homeland Security shall issue a detainer for an alien described in paragraph 1, E, and, if the alien is not otherwise detained by federal, state, or local officials, shall effectively and expeditiously take custody of the alien. SEC. 3. Enforcement by Attorney General of a state. A. Inspection of applicants for admission section 235, B, of the Immigration and Nationality Act, 8 U.S.C. 1225, B, is amended. 1. By redesignating paragraph 3 as paragraph 4. And 2. By inserting after paragraph 2 the following. 3. Enforcement by Attorney General of a state the Attorney General of a state, or other authorized state officer, alleging a violation of the detention and removal requirements under paragraph 1, or 2, that harms such state or its residents shall have standing to bring an action against the Secretary of Homeland Security on behalf of such state or the residents of such state in an appropriate district court of the United States to obtain appropriate injunctive relief. The court shall advance on the docket and expedite the disposition of a civil action filed under this paragraph to the greatest extent practicable. For purposes of this paragraph, a state or its residents shall be considered to have been harmed if the state or its residents experience harm, including financial harm in excess of $100. B. Apprehension and detention of aliens. Section 236 of the Immigration and Nationality Act, 8 U.S.C. 1226, as amended by this act, is further amended. 1. In subsection E. A. By striking or release. And B. By striking grant, revocation, or denial and insert revocation or denial. And 2. By adding at the end the following. If enforcement by Attorney General of a state, the Attorney General of a state, or other authorized state officer, alleging an action or decision by the Attorney General or Secretary of Homeland Security under the section to release any alien or grant bond or parole to any alien that harms such state or its residents shall have standing to bring an action against the Attorney General or Secretary of Homeland Security on behalf of such state or the residents of such state in an appropriate district court of the United States to obtain appropriate injunctive relief. The court shall advance on the docket and expedite the disposition of a civil action filed under this subsection to the greatest extent practicable. For purposes of this subsection, a state or its residents shall be considered to have been harmed if the state or its residents experience harm, including financial harm in excess of $100. C. Penalties. Section 243 of the Immigration and Nationality Act, 8 U.S.C. 1253, is amended by adding at the end the following. E. Enforcement by Attorney General of a state, the Attorney General of a state, or other authorized state officer, alleging a violation of the requirement to discontinue granting visas to citizens, subjects, nationals, and residents as described in subsection D. That harms such state or its residents shall have standing to bring an action against the Secretary of State on behalf of such state or the residents of such state in an appropriate district court of the United States to obtain appropriate injunctive relief. The court shall advance on the docket and expedite the disposition of a civil action filed under this subsection to the greatest extent practicable. For purposes of this subsection, a state or its residents shall be considered to have been harmed if the state or its residents experience harm, including financial harm in excess of $100. D. Certain classes of aliens. Section 212 D. 5 of the Immigration and Nationality Act, 8 U.S.C. 1182 D. 5 is amended. 1. By striking Attorney General each place such term appears and inserting Secretary of Homeland Security. And 2. By adding at the end the following. C. The Attorney General of a state, or other authorized state officer, alleging a violation of the limitation under subparagraph A, that parole solely be granted on a case-by-case basis, and solely for urgent humanitarian reasons or significant public benefit, that harms such state or its residents shall have standing to bring an action against the Secretary of Homeland Security on behalf of such state or the residents of such state in an appropriate district court of the United States to obtain appropriate injunctive relief. The court shall advance on the docket and expedite the disposition of a civil action filed under this subparagraph to the greatest extent practicable. For purposes of this subparagraph, a state or its residents shall be considered to have been harmed if the state or its residents experience harm, including financial harm in excess of $100. E. Detention. Section 241 A. 2 of the Immigration and Nationality Act, 8 U.S.C. 1231 A. 2 is amended. 1. By striking during the removal period and inserting the following. A. In general during the removal period. And 2. By adding at the end the following. B. Enforcement by Attorney General of a state, the Attorney General of a state, or other authorized state officer, alleging a violation of the detention requirement under subparagraph A, that harms such state or its residents shall have standing to bring an action against the Secretary of Homeland Security on behalf of such state or the residents of such state in an appropriate district court of the United States to obtain appropriate injunctive relief. The court shall advance on the docket and expedite the disposition of a civil action filed under this subparagraph to the greatest extent practicable. For purposes of this subparagraph, a state or its residents shall be considered to have been harmed if the state or its residents experience harm, including financial harm in excess of $100. If limit on injunctive relief. Section 242 if of the Immigration and Nationality Act, 8 U.S.C. 1252 if is amended by adding at the end following. 3. Certain actions. Paragraph 1 shall not apply to an action brought pursuant to Section 235 B. 3. Subsections E or if of Section 236 or Section 241 A. 2 B. Speaker of the House of Representatives, Vice President of the United States, and President of the Senate.
Yeah, so as I said previously, I did agree with this bill. Um, it is on the president's desk. It did pass with a okay majority. We're gonna go to. So we got two long bills here. HR 471 and we got HR 33. I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna listen to HR 33 and then we'll move on to 471. Now these are long, and I do not mind if you guys just skip over the Congress.gov reading it out to you. Pretty much for all that it says is it's just some tax relief for some people who do business with the United States, so have U.S. income, but aren't citizens, so they don't have any voice in our democracy anyways. All it is not taxing them because they're already being taxed by their own country for that same money. So I would definitely pass this.
There are 3 versions. Text available as XML/HTML, XML/HTML, new window, 73 kilobytes, TXT, 54 kilobytes, PDF, 266 kilobytes. Formatting necessary for an accurate reading of this legislative text may be missing or may be shown by tags, for example, deleted, or bold, or may be missing from TXT display. Shown here, referred in Senate, January 16, 2025. 119th Congress, First Session. HR33. In the Senate of the United States, January 16, 2025. Received. Read twice and refer to the Committee on Finance. ANACT. To amend the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to provide special rules for the taxation of certain residents of Taiwan with income from sources within the United States. Be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America and Congress assembled. Title I United States Taiwan Expedited Double Tax Relief Act. SEC. 101. Short title. This title may be cited as a United States Taiwan Expedited Double Tax Relief Act. SEC. 102. Special Rules for Taxation of Certain Residents of Taiwan. A. In general, Subpart D of Part 2 of Subchapter N of Chapter 1 of the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 is amended by inserting after Section 894 the following new section. SEC. 894A. Special Rules for Qualified Residents of Taiwan. A. Certain income from United States sources. 1. Interest, dividends, and royalties, etc. A. In general, in the case of interest, other than original issue discount, dividends, royalties, amounts described in Section 871, A. 1, C, and gains described in Section 871, A. 1, D, received by or paid to a qualified resident of Taiwan. I. Sections 871, 881, 1441, 1441, C, 5, and 1442, A, shall each be applied by substituting the applicable percentage, as defined in Section 894A, A, 1, C, for 30% each place it appears, and E. Sections 871, 881, A, and 1441, C, 1, shall each be applied by substituting a United States permanent establishment of a qualified resident of Taiwan for a trade or business within the United States each place it appears. B. Exceptions. I. In general, subparagraph A, shall not apply to I. Any dividend received from or paid by a real estate investment trust which is not a qualified right dividend. Share this. The second, any amount subject to Section 897. III. Any amount received from or paid by an expatriated entity, as defined in Section 7874, A, 2, to a foreign related person, as defined in Section 7874, D, 3, and IV. Any amount which is included in income under Section 860C to the extent that such amount does not exceed an excess inclusion with respect to a REMIC. E. Qualified right dividend for purposes of clause I. The term qualified right dividend means any dividend received from or paid by a real estate investment trust if such dividend is paid with respect to a class of shares that is publicly traded and the recipient of the dividend is a person who holds an interest in any class of shares of the real estate investment trust of not more than 5%. C. Applicable percentage for purposes of applying subparagraph A. I. In general, except as provided in clause E. The term applicable percentage means 10%. E. Special rules for dividends. In the case of any dividend in respect of stock received by or paid to a qualified resident of Taiwan, the applicable percentage shall be 15%, 10% in the case of a dividend which meets the requirements of subparagraph D and is received by or paid to an entity taxed as a corporation in Taiwan. D. Requirements for lower dividend rate. I. In general, the requirements of this subparagraph are met with respect to any dividend in respect of stock in a corporation if, at all times during the 12-month period ending on the date such stock becomes ex-dividend with respect to such dividend. I. The dividend is derived by a qualified resident of Taiwan, and the second, such qualified resident of Taiwan has held directly at least 10%, by vote in value, of the total outstanding shares of stock in such corporation. For purposes of subclause II, a person shall be treated as directly holding a share of stock during any period described in the preceding sentence if the share was held by a corporation from which such person later acquired that share and such corporation was, at the time the share was acquired, both a connected person to such person, and a qualified resident of Taiwan. E. Exception for RSCS and rights notwithstanding clause I. The requirements of this subparagraph shall not be treated as met with respect to any dividend paid by a regulated investment company or a real estate investment trust. 2. Qualified wages. A. In general, no tax shall be imposed under this chapter, and no amount shall be withheld under Section 1441, A, or Chapter 24, with respect to qualified wages paid to a qualified resident of Taiwan who I. Is not a resident of the United States, determined without regard to subsection C, 3, E, or E. Is employed as a member of the regular component of a ship or aircraft operated in international traffic. B. Qualified wages. I. In general, the term qualified wages means wages, salaries, or similar remunerations with respect to employment involving the performance of personal services within the United States which I. Are paid by, or on behalf of, any employer other than a United States person, and the second, are not borne by a United States permanent establishment of any person other than a United States person. E. Exceptions such terms shall not include director's fees, income derived as an entertainer or athlete, income derived as a student or trainee, pensions, amounts paid with respect to employment with the United States, any state, or political subdivision thereof, or any possession of the United States, or any political subdivision thereof, or other amounts specified in regulations or guidance under subsection F. 1, F. 3. Income derived from entertainment or athletic activities. A. In general, no tax shall be imposed under this chapter, and no amount shall be withheld under Section 1441, A, or Chapter 24, with respect to income derived by an entertainer or athlete who is a qualified resident of Taiwan from personal activities as such performed in the United States if the aggregate amount of gross receipts from such activities for the taxable year do not exceed $30,000. B. Exception subparagraph A. Shall not apply with respect to I. Income which is qualified wages, as defined in paragraph 2, B, determined without regard to clause E, thereof, or E. Income which is effectively connected with a United States permanent establishment. B. Income connected with a United States permanent establishment of a qualified resident of Taiwan. 1. In general. A. In general, in lieu of applying sections 871, B, and 882, a qualified resident of Taiwan that carries on a trade or business within the United States through a United States permanent establishment shall be taxable as provided in section 1, 11, 55, or 59A, on its taxable income which is effectively connected with such permanent establishment. B. Determination of taxable income. In determining taxable income for purposes of paragraph 1, gross income includes only gross income which is effectively connected with the permanent establishment. 2. Treatment of dispositions of United States real property in the case of a qualified resident of Taiwan, section 897, A, shall be applied. A. By substituting carried on a trade or business within the United States through a United States permanent establishment for were engaged in a trade or business within the United States, and B. By substituting such United States permanent establishment for such trade or business. 3. Treatment of branch profits taxes in the case of any corporation which is a qualified resident of Taiwan, section 884 shall be applied. A. By substituting 10% for 30% in subsection A, thereof, and B. By substituting a United States permanent establishment of a qualified resident of Taiwan for the conduct of a trade or business within the United States in subsection D, 1, thereof. 4. Special rule with respect to income derived from certain entertainment or athletic activities. A. In general, paragraph 1, shall not apply to the extent that the income is derived. I. In respect of entertainment or athletic activities performed in the United States, and E. By a qualified resident of Taiwan who is not the entertainer or athlete performing such activities. B. Exception subparagraph A shall not apply if the person described in subparagraph A, E, is contractually authorized to designate the individual who is to perform such activities. 5. Special rule with respect to certain amounts paragraph 1 shall not apply to any income which is wages, salaries, or similar remuneration with respect to employment or with respect to any amount which is described in subsection A, 2, B, E, C. Qualified resident of Taiwan for purposes of this section. 1. In general, the term qualified resident of Taiwan means any person who A. Is liable to tax under the laws of Taiwan by reason of such person's domicile, residence, place of management, place of incorporation, or any similar criterion. B. Is not a United States person, determined without regard to paragraph 3, E, and C. In the case of an entity taxed as a corporation in Taiwan, meets the requirements of paragraph 2. 2. Limitation on benefits for corporate entities of Taiwan. A. In general, subject to subparagraphs E, and if an entity meets the requirements of this paragraph only if it I. Meets the ownership and income requirements of subparagraph B. E. Meets the publicly traded requirements of subparagraph C, or i.e. meets the qualified subsidiary requirements of subparagraph D. B. Ownership and income requirements. The requirements of this subparagraph are met for an entity if I. At least 50%, by vote in value, of the total outstanding shares of stock in such entity are owned directly or indirectly by qualified residents of Taiwan, and E. Less than 50% of such entity's gross income, and in the case of an entity that is a member of a tested group, less than 50% of the tested group's gross income is paid or accrued, directly or indirectly, in the form of payments that are deductible for purposes of the income taxes imposed by Taiwan, to persons who are not I. Qualified residents of Taiwan, or the second, United States. Persons who meet such requirements with respect to the United States as determined by the Secretary to be equivalent to the requirements of this subsection, determined without regard to paragraph 1, B, with respect to residents of Taiwan. C. Publicly traded requirements. An entity meets the requirements of this subparagraph if I. The principal class of its shares, and any disproportionate class of shares, of such entity are primarily and regularly traded on an established securities market in Taiwan, or E. The primary place of management and control of the entity is in Taiwan and all classes of its outstanding shares described in clause I. Are regularly traded on an established securities market in Taiwan. D. Qualified subsidiary requirements. An entity meets the requirement of this subparagraph if I. At least 50%, by vote in value, of the total outstanding shares of the stock of such entity are owned directly or indirectly by 5 or fewer entities. I. Which meet the requirements of subparagraph C, or the second, which are United States persons the principal class of the shares, and any disproportionate class of shares, of which are primarily and regularly traded on an established securities market in the United States, and E. The entity meets the requirements of clause E of subparagraph B. E. Only indirect ownership through qualifying intermediaries counted. I. In general, stock in an entity owned by a person indirectly through one or more other persons shall not be treated as owned by such person in determining whether the person meets the requirements of subparagraph B, I, or D, I, unless all such other persons are qualifying intermediate owners. E. Qualifying intermediate owners. The term qualifying intermediate owner means a person that is I. A qualified resident of Taiwan, or the second, a resident of any other foreign country, other than a foreign country that is a foreign country of concern, that has in effect a comprehensive convention with the United States for the avoidance of double taxation. I.e., special rule for qualified subsidiaries for purposes of applying subparagraph D, I. The term qualifying intermediate owner shall include any person who is a United States person who meets such requirements with respect to the United States as determined by the Secretary to be equivalent to the requirements of this subsection, determined without regard to paragraph 1, B, with respect to residents of Taiwan. If certain payments not included in determining whether the requirements of subparagraph B, E, or D, E are met with respect to an entity, the following payments shall not be taken into account. I. Arm's length payments by the entity in the ordinary course of business for services or tangible property. E. In the case of a tested group, intra-group transactions. 3. Dual residence. A. Rules for determination of status. I. In general, an individual who is an applicable dual resident, and who is described in subparagraph B, C, or D, shall be treated as a qualified resident of Taiwan. E. Applicable dual resident for purposes of this paragraph. The term applicable dual resident means an individual who I. Is not a United States citizen. II. Is a resident of the United States, determined without regard to subparagraph E, and the third, would be a qualified resident of Taiwan but for paragraph 1, B. B. Permanent home. An individual is described in this subparagraph if such individual I. Has a permanent home available to such individual in Taiwan, and E. Does not have a permanent home available to such individual in the United States. C. Center of vital interest. An individual is described in this subparagraph if I. Such individual has a permanent home available to such individual in both Taiwan and the United States, and E. Such individual's personal and economic relations, center of vital interest, are closer to Taiwan than to the United States. D. Habitual abode. An individual is described in this subparagraph if I. Such individual I. Does not have a permanent home available to such individual in either Taiwan or the United States, or the second, has a permanent home available to such individual in both Taiwan and the United States but such individual's center of vital interest under subparagraph C, E, cannot be determined, and E. Such individual has a habitual abode in Taiwan and not the United States. E. United States tax treatment of qualified resident of Taiwan notwithstanding section 7701. An individual who is treated as a qualified resident of Taiwan by reason of this paragraph for all or any portion of a taxable year shall not be treated as a resident of the United States for purposes of computing such individual's United States income tax liability for such taxable year or portion thereof. 4. Rules of special application. A. Dividends for purposes of applying this section to any dividend. Paragraph 2, D, shall be applied without regard to clause E, thereof. B. Items of income emanating from an active trade or business in Taiwan for purposes of this section. I. In general, notwithstanding the preceding paragraphs of this subsection, if an entity taxed as a corporation in Taiwan is not a qualified resident of Taiwan but meets the requirements of subparagraphs A and B of paragraph 1, any qualified item of income such entity derived from the United States shall be treated as income of a qualified resident of Taiwan. E. Qualified items of income. I. In general, the term qualified item of income means any item of income which emanates from, or is incidental to, the conduct of an active trade or business in Taiwan, other than operating as a holding company, providing overall supervision or administration of a group of companies, providing group financing, or making or managing investments, unless such making or managing investments is carried on by a bank, insurance company, or registered securities dealer in the ordinary course of its business as such. The second, substantial activity requirement. An item of income which is derived from a trade or business conducted in the United States or from a connected person shall be a qualified item of income only if the trade or business activity conducted in Taiwan to which the item is related is substantial in relation to the same or a complementary trade or business activity carried on in the United States. For purposes of applying this subclause, activities conducted by persons that are connected to the entity described in clause I shall be deemed to be conducted by such entity. i.e., exception this subparagraph shall not apply to any item of income derived by an entity if at least 50%, by vote or value, of such entity is owned, directly or indirectly, or controlled by residents of a foreign country of concern. D. Other definitions and special rules for purposes of this section. 1. United States Permanent Establishment. A. In general, the term United States Permanent Establishment means, with respect to a qualified resident of Taiwan, a permanent establishment of such resident which is within the United States. B. Special rule: the determination of whether there is a permanent establishment of a qualified resident of Taiwan within the United States shall be made without regard to whether an entity which is taxed as a corporation in Taiwan and which is a qualified resident of Taiwan controls or is controlled by I. A domestic corporation, or E. Any other person that carries on business in the United States, whether through a permanent establishment or otherwise. 2. Permanent establishment. A. In general, the term permanent establishment means a fixed place of business through which a trade or business is wholly or partly carried on. Such term shall include I. A place of management. E. A branch, i.e., an office. IV. A factory. B. A workshop, and I. A mine, an oil or gas well, a quarry, or any other place of extraction of natural resources. B. Special rules for certain temporary projects. I. In general, a building site or construction or installation project, or an installation or drilling rig or ship used for the exploration or exploitation of the seabed and its subsoil, and their natural resources, constitutes a permanent establishment only if it lasts, or the activities of the rig or ship lasts, for more than 12 months. E. Determination of 12-month period for purposes of clause I. The period over which a building site or construction or installation project of a person lasts shall include any period of more than 30 days during which such person does not carry on activities at such building site or construction or installation project, but connected activities are carried on at such building site or construction or installation project by one or more connected persons. C. Habitual exercise of contract authority treated as permanent establishment notwithstanding subparagraphs A and B, where a person, other than an agent of an independent status to whom subparagraph D, E, applies, is acting on behalf of a trade or business of a qualified resident of Taiwan and has and habitually exercises an authority to conclude contracts that are binding on the trade or business. That trade or business shall be deemed to have a permanent establishment in the country in which such authority is exercised in respect of any activities that the person undertakes for the trade or business, unless the activities of such person are limited to those described in subparagraph D, I, that, if exercised through a fixed place of business, would not make this fixed place of business a permanent establishment under the provisions of that subparagraph. D. Exclusions. I. In general, notwithstanding subparagraphs A and B, the term permanent establishment shall not include I. The use of facilities solely for the purpose of storage, display, or delivery of goods or merchandise belonging to the trade or business. II. The maintenance of a stock of goods or merchandise belonging to the trade or business solely for the purpose of storage, display, or delivery. III. The maintenance of a stock of goods or merchandise belonging to the trade or business solely for the purpose of processing by another trade or business. IV. The maintenance of a fixed place of business solely for the purpose of purchasing goods or merchandise, or of collecting information, for the trade or business. B. The maintenance of a fixed place of business solely for the purpose of carrying on, for the trade or business, any other activity of a preparatory or auxiliary character, or VI. The maintenance of a fixed place of business solely for any combination of the activities mentioned in subclauses I through B, provided that the overall activity of the fixed place of business resulting from this combination is of a preparatory or auxiliary character. E. Brokers and other independent agents at trade or business shall not be considered to have a permanent establishment in a country merely because it carries on business in such country through a broker, general commission agent, or any other agent of an independent status, provided that such persons are acting in the ordinary course of their business as independent agents. 3. Tested group. The term tested group includes, with respect to any entity taxed as a corporation in Taiwan, such entity and any other entity taxed as a corporation in Taiwan that A. Participates as a member with such entity in a tax consolidation, fiscal unity, or similar regime that requires members of the group to share profits or losses, or B. Shares losses with such entity pursuant to a group relief or other loss-sharing regime. 4. Connected person. Two persons shall be connected persons if one owns, directly or indirectly, at least 50% of the interest in the other, or, in the case of a corporation, at least 50% of the aggregate vote and value of the corporation's shares, or another person owns, directly or indirectly, at least 50% of the interest, or, in the case of a corporation, at least 50% of the aggregate vote and value of the corporation's shares, in each person. In any case, a person shall be connected to another if, based on all the relevant facts and circumstances, one has control of the other or both are under the control of the same person or persons. 5. FOREIGN country of concern. The term foreign country of concern has the meaning given such term under paragraph 7 of section 9901 of the William M. Mac. Thornberry National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2021, 15 U.S.C. 4651, 7, as added by section 103, A, 4, of the CHIPS Act of 2022. 6. Partnerships. Beneficiaries of estates and trusts for purposes of this section. A. A qualified resident of Taiwan which is a partner of a partnership which carries on a trade or business within the United States through a United States permanent establishment shall be treated as carrying on such trade or business through such permanent establishment, and B. A qualified resident of Taiwan which is a beneficiary of an estate or trust which carries on a trade or business within the United States through a United States permanent establishment shall be treated as carrying on such trade or business through such permanent establishment. 7. Denial of benefits for certain payments through hybrid entities for purposes of this section. Rules similar to the rules of section 894 C shall apply. E. Application. 1. In general, this section shall not apply to any period unless the Secretary has determined that Taiwan has provided benefits to United States persons for such period that are reciprocal to the benefits provided to qualified residents of Taiwan under this section. 2. Provision of reciprocity. The President or his designee is authorized to exchange letters, enter into an agreement, or take other necessary and appropriate steps relative to Taiwan for the reciprocal provision of the benefits described in this section. If regulations or other guidance. 1. In general, the Secretary shall issue such regulations or other guidance as may be necessary or appropriate to carry out the provisions of this section, including such regulations or guidance for A. Determining I. What constitutes a United States permanent establishment of a qualified resident of Taiwan, and E. Income that is effectively connected with such a permanent establishment. B. Preventing the abuse of the provisions of this section by persons who are not, or who should not be treated as, qualified residents of Taiwan. C. Requirements for record keeping and reporting. D. Rules to assist withholding agents or employers in determining whether a foreign person is a qualified resident of Taiwan for purposes of determining whether withholding or reporting is required for a payment, and, if withholding is required, whether it should be applied at a reduced rate. E. The application of subsection A. 1. D. I. to stock held by predecessor owners. F. Determining what amounts are to be treated as qualified wages for purposes of subsection A. 2. G. Determining the amounts to which subsection A. 3. applies. H. Defining established securities market for purposes of subsection C. I. The application of the rules of subsection C. 4. B. J. The application of subsection D. 6. and section 1446. K. Determining ownership interests held by residents of a foreign country of concern, and L. Determining the starting and ending dates for periods with respect to the application of this section under subsection E, which may be separate dates for taxes withheld at the source and other taxes. 2. Regulations to be consistent with model treaty. Any regulations or other guidance issued under this section shall, to the extent practical, be consistent with the provisions of the United States Model Income Tax Convention dated February 7, 2016. B. Conforming amendment to withholding tax subchapter A of Chapter 3 of the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 is amended by adding at the end the following new section. SEC 1447. Withholding for qualified residents of Taiwan. For reduced rates of withholding for certain residents of Taiwan, see Section 894A. C. Clerical amendments. 1. The table of sections for Subpart D of Part 2 of Subchapter N of Chapter 1 of the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 is amended by inserting after the item relating to Section 894 the following new item. Secretary 894A. Special rules for qualified residents of Taiwan. 2. The table of sections for Subchapter A of Chapter 3 of such code is amended by adding at the end the following new item. Secretary 1447. Withholding for qualified residents of Taiwan. Title: The Second United States-Taiwan Tax Agreement Authorization Act. SEC 201. Short title. This title may be cited as a United States-Taiwan Tax Agreement Authorization Act. SEC 202. Definitions. In this title. 1. Agreement. The term agreement means the tax agreement authorized by Section 203. A. 2. Appropriate congressional committees. The term appropriate congressional committees means A. The Committee on Foreign Relations and the Committee on Finance of the Senate. And B. The Committee on Ways and Means of the House of Representatives. 3. Approval legislation. The term approval legislation means legislation that approves the agreement. 4. Implementing legislation. The term implementing legislation means legislation that makes any changes to the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 necessary to implement the agreement. SEC 203. Authorization to negotiate and enter into agreement. A. In general, subsequent to a determination under Section 894A, E.1 of the Internal Revenue Code of 1986, as added by the United States-Taiwan Expedited Double Tax Relief Act, the President is authorized to negotiate and enter into a tax agreement relative to Taiwan. B. Elements of agreement. 1. Conformity with bilateral income tax conventions. The President shall ensure that A. Any provisions included in the agreement conform with provisions customarily contained in United States bilateral income tax conventions, as exemplified by the 2016 United States Model Income Tax Convention. And B. The agreement does not include elements outside the scope of the 2016 United States Model Income Tax Convention. 2. Incorporation of tax agreements and laws notwithstanding paragraph 1. The agreement may incorporate and restate provisions of any agreement or existing United States law addressing double taxation for residents of the United States and Taiwan. 3. Authority. The agreement shall include the following statement. The agreement is entered into pursuant to the United States-Taiwan Tax Agreement Authorization Act. 4. Entry into force. The agreement shall include a provision conditioning entry into force upon A. Enactment of approval legislation and implementing legislation pursuant to Section 207. And B. Confirmation by the Secretary of the Treasury that the relevant authority in Taiwan has approved and taken appropriate steps required to implement the agreement. SEC 204. Consultations with Congress. A. Notification upon commencement of negotiations. The President shall provide written notification to the appropriate congressional committees of the commencement of negotiations between the United States and Taiwan on the agreement at least 15 calendar days before commencing such negotiations. B. Consultations during negotiations. 1. Briefings not later than 90 days after commencement of negotiations with respect to the agreement, and every 180 days thereafter until the President enters into the agreement. The President shall provide a briefing to the appropriate congressional committees on the status of the negotiations, including a description of elements under negotiation. 2. Meetings and other consultations. A. In general, in the course of negotiations with respect to the agreement, the Secretary of the Treasury, in coordination with the Secretary of State, shall I. Meet, upon request, with the chairman or ranking member of any of the appropriate congressional committees regarding negotiating objectives and the status of negotiations in progress. And E. Consult closely and on a timely basis with, and keep fully apprised of the negotiations, the appropriate congressional committees. B. Elements of consultations. The consultations described in subparagraph A shall include consultations with respect to I. The nature of the contemplated agreement. E. How and to what extent the contemplated agreement is consistent with the elements set forth in Section 203. B. And i.e. the implementation of the contemplated agreement, including I. The general effect of the contemplated agreement on existing laws. The second, proposed changes to any existing laws to implement the contemplated agreement. And the third, proposed administrative actions to implement the contemplated agreement. SEC 205. Approval and implementation of agreement. A. In general, the agreement may not enter into force unless 1. The President, at least 60 days before the day on which the President enters into the agreement, publishes the text of the contemplated agreement on a publicly available website of the Department of the Treasury. And 2. There is enacted into law, with respect to the agreement, approval legislation and implementing legislation pursuant to Section 207. B. Entry into force. The President may provide for the agreement to enter into force upon 1. Enactment of approval legislation and implementing legislation pursuant to Section 207. And 2. Confirmation by the Secretary of the Treasury that the relevant authority in Taiwan has approved and taken appropriate steps required to implement the agreement. SEC 206. Submission to Congress of agreement and implementation policy. A. Submission of agreement not later than 270 days after the President enters into the agreement. The President or the President's designee shall submit to Congress 1. The final text of the agreement. And 2. A technical explanation of the agreement. B. Submission of implementation policy not later than 270 days after the President enters into the agreement. The Secretary of the Treasury shall submit to Congress 1. A description of those changes to existing laws that the President considers would be required in order to ensure that the United States acts in a manner consistent with the agreement. And 2. A statement of anticipated administrative action proposed to implement the agreement. SEC 207. Consideration of approval legislation and implementing legislation. A. In general, the approval legislation with respect to the agreement shall include the following. Congress approves the agreement submitted to Congress pursuant to Section 206 of the United States-Taiwan Tax Agreement Authorization Act on, with the blank space being filled with the appropriate date. B. Approval legislation committee referral. The approval legislation shall 1. In the Senate, be referred to the Committee on Foreign Relations. And 2. In the House of Representatives, be referred to the Committee on Ways and Means. C. Implementing legislation committee referral. The implementing legislation shall 1. In the Senate, be referred to the Committee on Finance. And 2. In the House of Representatives, be referred to the Committee on Ways and Means. SEC 208. Relationship of agreement to Internal Revenue Code of 1986. A. Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to control no provision of the agreement or approval legislation, nor the application of any such provision to any person or circumstance, which is inconsistent with any provision of the Internal Revenue Code of 1986, shall have effect. B. Construction Nothing in this title shall be construed. 1. To amend or modify any law of the United States. Or 2. To limit any authority conferred under any law of the United States, unless specifically provided for in this title. SEC. 209. Authorization of subsequent tax agreements relative to Taiwan. A. In general subsequent to the enactment of approval legislation and implementing legislation pursuant to Section 207. 1. The term tax agreement in Section 203, A, shall be treated as including any tax agreement relative to Taiwan which supplements or supersedes the agreement to which such approval legislation and implementing legislation relates, and 2. The term agreement shall be treated as including such tax agreement. B. Requirements, etc. to apply separately the provisions of this title, including Section 204, shall be applied separately with respect to each tax agreement referred to in subsection A. SEC. 210. United States treatment of double taxation matters with respect to Taiwan. A. Findings Congress makes the following findings. 1. The United States addresses issues with respect to double taxation with foreign countries by entering into bilateral income tax conventions, known as tax treaties, with such countries, subject to the advice and consent of the Senate to ratification pursuant to Article the 2nd of the Constitution. 2. The United States has entered into more than 60 such tax treaties, which facilitate economic activity, strengthen bilateral cooperation, and benefit United States workers, businesses, and other United States taxpayers. 3. Due to Taiwan's unique status, the United States is unable to enter into an Article the 2nd tax treaty with Taiwan, necessitating an agreement to address issues with respect to double taxation. B. Statement of policy. It is the policy of the United States to 1. Provide for additional bilateral tax relief with respect to Taiwan, beyond that provided for in Section 894A of the Internal Revenue Code of 1986, as added by the United States Taiwan Expedited Double Tax Relief Act, only after entry into force of an agreement, as provided for in Section 205, and only in a manner consistent with such agreement. And 2. Continue to provide for bilateral tax relief with sovereign states to address double taxation and other related matters through entering into bilateral income tax conventions, subject to the Senate's advice and consent to ratification pursuant to Article the 2nd of the Constitution. Passed the House of Representatives January 15, 2025. Attest. Kevin F. McCumber, Clerk.
All right, so that was a lot of verbiage to essentially just say to stop double taxing Taiwan um, citizens. That's pretty much all that said. It did have a roll call vote, and it looks like there was one Republican no, everybody else voted yes. 9 not voting. So that being said, passed pretty damn, it passed pretty fairly partisan. Um, so now let's go ahead and move on to HR 471. I'm going to talk about this one first so that way I can get out of here and just leave you guys a ending message at the end. Because this one is really long. This one looks to be probably about 3 times longer than the previous bill. So I am going to let this one play after I kind of give my 2 cents on it. And my 2 cents on it is it's a firewising bill. I don't know why the Democrats that voted no on it voted no on it. If you look here in the roll call, 141 voted no, 64 voted yes, 215 Republicans voted yes, 13 people did not vote overall. But it's a firewising bill, and I believe in firewising. I actually, in high school, worked as part of the Oregon Youth Conservation Corps, which went out, and your very first assignment every year is to go out to this area that's outside of the fire district and firewise around people's houses. So if there is a big fire, the fire trucks can get there, save their houses, and it'll hopefully actually slow down the entire spread of the fire overall. Um, but yeah, so I'm going to say that I would pass this bill because it makes sense to pass. But I'm going to let you guys listen to the thing in its entirety. And once it ends, I will be back with an away message. You guys enjoy the bill, I guess. Damn, it's taking a minute to load. I apologize for that, guys. I probably should have started a second sooner. did not realize the longer length would make us wait longer. I just thought it would start right up.
There is one version of the bill. Text available as XML/HTML. XML/HTML. New window. 218 kilobytes. TXT. 149 kilobytes. PDF. 405 kilobytes. Formatting necessary for an accurate reading of this legislative text may be missing or may be shown by tags. For example, deleted, or bold, or may be missing from TXT display. Shown here. Introduced in House, January 16, 2025. 119th Congress First Session. HR 471. To expedite under the National Environmental Policy Act of 1969 and improve forest management activities on national forest system lands, on public lands under the jurisdiction of the Bureau of Land Management, and on tribal lands to return resilience to overgrown, fire-prone forested lands, and for other purposes. In the House of Representatives. January 16, 2025. Mr. Westerman, for himself, Mr. Peters, Mr. Tiffany, Mr. Panetta, Mr. Sauber, Mr. Whitesides, Mr. Collins, Mr. Vasquez, Mrs. Kim, Mr. Costa, Mr. Zink, Mr. Harder of California, Mr. Johnson of South Dakota, Mr. Barra, Mrs. Kiggins of Virginia, Mr. Garamendi, Miss Malloy, Mr. Thompson of California, Mr. Bijik, Mr. Correa, Mr. Crank, Mr. Golden of Maine, Mr. Azell, Mr. Mullen, Mr. Hurd of Colorado, Miss Lee of Nevada, Mr. Valadao, Mr. Gray, Mr. Barr, Mr. Hoyer, Mr. Carter of Georgia, Miss Pedersen, Mr. Joyce of Pennsylvania, Mr. Obernolt, Mr. Wahlberg, Mr. Lam Alpha, Mr. Gassar, Miss Bobert, Mr. McClintock, Mr. Issa, Mr. Fong, Miss Hageman, Mr. Fry, and Mr. Amadei of Nevada, introduced the following bill, which was referred to the Committee on Natural Resources, and in addition to the Committees on Agriculture, and Science, Space, and Technology, for a period to be subsequently determined by the Speaker, in each case for consideration of such provisions as fall within the jurisdiction of the committee concerned. A bill. To expedite under the National Environmental Policy Act of 1969 and improve forest management activities on national forest system lands, on public lands under the jurisdiction of the Bureau of Land Management, and on tribal lands to return resilience to overgrown, fire-prone forested lands, and for other purposes. Be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America and Congress assembled. Section 1. Short title. Table of Contents. A. Short title. This act may be cited as a Fix Our Forest Act. B. Table of Contents. The table of contents for this act is as follows. Secretary 1. Short title. Table of Contents. Secretary 2. Definitions. Title I. Landscape Scale Restoration. Subtitle A. Addressing Emergency Wildfire Risks in High Priority Firesheds. Secretary 101. Designation of Forest Management Areas. Secretary 102. Forest Center. Secretary 103. Forest Registry. Secretary 104. Shared Stewardship. Secretary 105. Forest Assessments. Secretary 106. Emergency Forest Management. Secretary 107. Sunset. Subtitle B. Expanding Collaborative Tools to Reduce Wildfire Risk and Improve Forest Health. Secretary 111. Modification of the treatment of certain revenue and payments under Good Neighbor Agreements. Secretary 112. Fixing Stewardship and Result Contracting. Secretary 113. Intra-Agency Strike Teams. Secretary 114. Locally Led Restoration. Secretary 115. Joint Chiefs Landscape Restoration Partnership Program. Secretary 116. Collaborative Forest Landscape Restoration Program. Secretary 117. Utilizing Grazing for Wildfire Risk Reduction. Secretary 118. Water Source Protection Program. Secretary 119. Watershed Condition Framework Technical Corrections. Subtitle C. Litigation Reform. Secretary 121. Common Sense Litigation Reform. Secretary 122. Consultation on Forest Plans. Title the Second. Protecting Communities in the Wildland-Urban Interface. Secretary 201. Community Wildfire Risk Reduction Program. Secretary 202. Community Wildfire Defense Research Program. Secretary 203. Vegetation Management, Facility Inspection, and Operation and Maintenance relating to Electric Transmission and Distribution Facility Rights of Way. Secretary 204. Categorical Exclusion for Electric Utility Lines Rights of Way. Secretary 205. Seeds of Success. Secretary 206. Program to Support Priority Reforestation and Restoration Projects of Department of the Interior. Secretary 207. Fire Department Repayment. Title the Third. Transparency, Technology, and Partnerships. Subtitle A. Transparency and Technology. Secretary 301. BioR Innovations and Opportunities for Conservation, Health, and Advancements in Research. Secretary 302. Accurate Hazardous Fuels Reduction Reports. Secretary 303. Public-Private Wildfire Technology Deployment and Demonstration Partnership. Secretary 304. GAO Study on Forest Service Policies. Secretary 305. Forest Service Western Headquarters Study. Secretary 306. Keeping Forest Plans Current and Monitored. Secretary 307. Container Aerial Firefighting System, CAFS. Secretary 308. Study on Pine Beetle Infestation. Subtitle B. White Oak Resilience. Secretary 311. White Oak Restoration Initiative Coalition. Secretary 312. Forest Service Pilot Program. Secretary 313. Department of the Interior White Oak Review and Restoration. Secretary 314. White Oak Regeneration and Upland Oak Habitat. Secretary 315. Tree Nursery Shortages. Secretary 316. White Oak Research. Secretary 317. USDA Formal Initiative. Secretary 318. Authorities. Title of Ensuring Casualty Assistance for Our Firefighters. Secretary 401. Wildland Fire Management Casualty Assistance Program. SEC. 2. Definitions. In this Act. 1. Director. The term Director means the Director of the Forest Center appointed under Section 102. 2. Forest. The term Forest means a landscape scale area that faces similar wildfire threat where a response strategy could influence the wildfire outcome. 3. Forest Management Project. The term Forest Management Project means a project under Section 106. 4. Forest Registry. The term Forest Registry means the Forest Registry established under Section 103. 5. Forest Plan. The term Forest Plan means A land use plan prepared by the Bureau of Land Management for public lands pursuant to Section 202 of the Federal Land Policy and Management Act of 1976, 43 U.S.C. 1712. B. A land and resource management plan prepared by the Forest Service for a unit of the National Forest System pursuant to Section 6 of the Forest and Rangeland Renewable Resources Planning Act of 1974, 16 U.S.C. 1604. Or C. A forest management plan, as defined in Section 304 of the National Indian Forest Resources Management Act, 25 U.S.C. 3104, with respect to Indian forest land or rangeland. 6. Governor. The term governor means the governor or any other appropriate executive official of an affected state or Indian tribe or the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. 7. Hazardous fuels management activities. The term hazardous fuels management activities means any vegetation management activities, or combination thereof, that reduce the risk of wildfire, including mechanical thinning, mastication, prescribed burning, cultural burning, as determined by the applicable Indian tribe, timber harvest, and grazing. 8. HFRA terms. The terms at-risk community, community wildfire protection plan, and wildland-urban interface have the meanings given such terms, respectively, in Section 101 of the Healthy Forest Restoration Act of 2003, 16 U.S.C. 6511. 9. Indian forest land or rangeland. The term Indian forest land or rangeland means land that A. is held in trust by, or with a restriction against alienation by, the United States for an Indian tribe or a member of an Indian tribe, and B. Is Indian forest land, as defined in Section 304 of the National Indian Forest Resources Management Act, 25 U.S.C. 3103. Or the second has a cover of grasses, brush, or any similar vegetation. Or E. formerly had a forest cover or vegetative cover that is capable of restoration. 10. Indian tribe. The term Indian tribe has a meaning given that term in Section 4 of the Indian Self-Determination and Education Assistance Act, 25 U.S.C. 5304. 11. National Forest System lands. The term National Forest System lands has a meaning given the term in Section 11A of the Forest and Rangeland Renewable Resources Planning Act of 1974, 16 U.S.C. 1609. 12. Public lands. The term public lands has a meaning given that term in Section 103 of the Federal Land Policy and Management Act of 1976, 43 U.S.C. 1702, except that the term includes Coos Bay Wagon Road grant lands and Oregon and California Railroad grant lands. 13. Relevant congressional committees. The term relevant congressional committees means A. The Committees on Natural Resources and Agriculture of the House of Representatives, and B. The Committees on Energy and Natural Resources and Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry of the Senate. 14. Responsible official. The term responsible official means an employee of the Department of the Interior or Forest Service who has the authority to make and implement a decision on a proposed action. 15. Secretaries. The term secretaries means each of A. The Secretary of the Interior, and B. The Secretary of Agriculture. 16. Secretary. The term secretary means the Secretary of Agriculture. 17. Secretary concerned. The term secretary concerned means A. The Secretary of Agriculture, with respect to National Forest System lands, and B. The Secretary of the Interior, with respect to public lands. 18. Special district. The term special district means a political subdivision of a state that A. has significant budgetary autonomy or control, B. was created by or pursuant to the laws of the state for the purpose of performing a limited and specific governmental or proprietary function, and C. is distinct from any other local government unit within the state. 19. State. The term state means each of the several states, the District of Columbia, and each territory of the United States. Title I. Landscape scale restoration. Subtitle A. Addressing emergency wildfire risks in high priority firesheds. SEC 101. Designation of forest management areas. A. Designation of forest management areas. 1. Initial designations for the period beginning on the date of enactment of this act and ending on the date that is 5 years after the date of enactment of this act. There are designated forest management areas, which A. shall be comprised of individual landscape scale firesheds identified as being a high-risk forest in the Wildfire Crisis Strategy published by the Forest Service in January 2022. B. shall be comprised of individual landscape scale firesheds identified by the Secretary, in consultation with the Secretary of the Interior, as being in the top 20% of the 7,688 firesheds published by the Rocky Mountain Research Station of the Forest Service in 2019 for wildfire exposure based on the following criteria. I. Wildfire exposure and corresponding risk to communities, including risk to life and structures. E. Wildfire exposure and corresponding risk to municipal watersheds, including tribal water supplies and systems. And i.e., risk of forest conversion due to wildfire. C. shall not overlap with any other forest management areas. D. may contain federal and non-federal land, including Indian forest lands or rangelands. And E. where the Secretary concerned shall carry out forest management projects. 2. Further forest management area designations. A. In general, on the date that is 5 years after the date of the enactment of this act and every 5 years thereafter, the Secretary, in consultation with the Secretary of the Interior, shall submit to the relevant congressional committees an updated map of firesheds based on the forest registry maintained under Section 103. B. Designation not later than 60 days after submitting an updated forest map under subparagraph the Secretary shall, based on such map, designate additional forest management areas that are identified as being in the top 20% of firesheds at risk of wildfire exposure based on the criteria specified in subparagraphs B, C, D, and E of paragraph 1. B. Applicability of NEPA. The designation of forest management areas under this section shall not be subject to the requirements of the National Environmental Policy Act of 1969, 42 U.S.C. 4321 as SEC. SEC 102. Forest Center. A. Establishment. 1. In general, the Secretary, acting through the Chief of the Forest Service, and the Secretary of the Interior, acting through the Director of the U.S. Geological Survey, shall jointly establish an interagency center, to be known as the Forest Center, hereinafter referred to as the Center, to carry out the purposes in subsection B. 2. Composition. A. Divisions. The Center shall be comprised of the following divisions. I. Technology and Engineering. E. Data Services. I.e. Analysis and Prediction. IV. Education and Consultation. B. Representatives. The Center shall be comprised of at least one career representative from each of the following. I. The Forest Service. E. The Bureau of Land Management. I.e. the National Park Service. IV. The Bureau of Indian Affairs. B. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I. The U.S. Geological Survey. I. The Department of Defense. III. The Department of Homeland Security. X. The Department of Energy. X. The Federal Emergency Management Agency. Psi. The National Science Foundation. She. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Shi. The National Aeronautics and Space Administration. Civ. The National Institute of Standards and Technology. XV. The United States Fire Administration. C. Appointments. Each representative of a department, agency, or other entity specified in subparagraph B shall be appointed by the head of that department, agency, or other entity, as applicable. 3. Director. The representatives appointed under paragraph 2 shall, by majority vote, appoint a director of the center, who a. shall be an employee of the U.S. Geological Survey or the Forest Service. B. shall serve an initial term of not more than 7 years. C. may serve one additional term of not more than 7 years after the initial term described in subparagraph B. And D. shall be responsible for the management and operation of the center. 4. Associate directors in consultation with the representatives appointed under paragraph 2. The director may appoint such associate directors as the director determines necessary. 5. Additional representation. The Secretary, acting through the Chief of the Forest Service, and the Secretary of the Interior, acting through the Director of the U.S. Geological Survey, may jointly appoint additional representatives of federal agencies, states, Indian tribes, or local governments to the center, as the secretaries determine necessary. B. Purposes. The purposes of the center are to 1. Comprehensively assess and predict, using data tools, including artificial intelligence, and other decision support products, fire, and smoke in the wildland and built environment interface across jurisdictions to inform. A. Land and fuels management. B. Community, including at-risk communities identified in forest assessments conducted under Section 105, and built environment risk reduction, including the support and development of community wildfire protection plans and evacuation decisions. And C. Public health risk reduction related to wildland fire and smoke, including air quality monitoring and forecasting and smoke prediction models. D. Fire response and management, including the pre-positioning of wildfire suppression personnel and assets based on real-time risk. And E. Post-fire recovery activities, including activities related to vegetation recovery, debris flows and flooding, watershed recovery and protection, and ecosystem health. 2. Provide data aggregation, real-time land and fuels management services, and science-based decision support services to inform the purposes specified in subparagraph A through E of paragraph 1. 3. Reduce fragmentation and duplication across federal land management agencies with respect to predictive service and decision support functions related to wildland fire and smoke, including through the provision of data aggregation described in paragraph 2. 4. Promote coordination and sharing of data regarding wildland fire and smoke decision-making, including through the provision of data aggregation described in paragraph 2, to each of the entities specified in subparagraphs A through F of paragraph 8. 5. Streamline procurement processes for technologies, including technologies identified under the pilot program established under Section 303, and cybersecurity systems related to addressing wildland fire and smoke for the purposes of scaling such technologies and systems across federal agencies. 6. Amplify and distribute existing, and develop as necessary, publicly accessible data, models, technologies, including mapping technologies, assessments, and National Weather Service fire weather forecasts to support short and long-term planning regarding wildland fire and smoke risk reduction and post-fire recovery while avoiding duplicative efforts, as determined by the Director. 7. Maintain the forest registry established under Section 103. And 8. Disseminate data tools, including artificial intelligence, and other decision support products, for use in manners consistent with the purposes described paragraphs 1 through 7 to the following. A. Federal agencies. B. Indian tribes. C. State and local governments. D. Academic or research institutions. E. Wildland firefighting entities, including applicable incident management teams and geographic coordination centers. F. Other entities, including public, private, and nonprofit entities, with expertise in land management, air quality, water management, or public health, as determined appropriate by the Director. C. Memoranda of Understanding. The Center may enter into memoranda of understanding, contracts, or other agreements with state governments, Indian tribes, local governments, academic, or research institutions, and private entities to improve the information and operations of the Center. D. Administrative support, technical services, and staff support. 1. USGS support. The Secretary of the Interior shall make personnel of the U.S. Geological Survey available to the Center for such administrative support, technical services, and development and dissemination of data as the Secretary determines necessary to carry out this section. 2. USFS support. The Secretary shall make personnel of the Forest Service available to the Center for such administrative support, technical services, and the development and dissemination of information related to forest management, and the Forest Registry as the Secretary determines necessary to carry out this section. 3. Funding notwithstanding Section 708 of Title 7 of Division E of the Consolidated Appropriations Act, 2023, Public Law 117-328, the Secretary of the Interior and Secretary may enter into agreements to share the management and operational cost of the Center. E. Rule of construction. Nothing in this section shall be construed to affect the ownership of any data sources. SEC. 103. Forest Registry. A. Forest Registry. The Secretary, acting through the Director of the Forest Center appointed under Section 102, shall maintain a forest registry on a publicly accessible website that provides interactive geospatial data on individual firesheds, including information on 1. Wildfire exposure delineated by ownership, including rights of way for utilities and other public or private purposes. 2. Any hazardous fuels management activities that have occurred within an individual forest in the past 10 years. 3. Wildfire exposure with respect to such forest delineated by A. Wildfire exposure and corresponding risk to communities, including risk to life and structures. B. Wildfire exposure and corresponding risk to municipal watersheds, including tribal water supplies and systems. And C. Risk of forest conversion due to wildfire. 4. The percentage of the forest that has burned in wildfires in the past 10 years, including, to the extent practicable, delineations of acres that have burned at a high severity. 5. Spatial patterns of wildfire exposure, including plausible extreme fire events. And 6. Any hazardous fuels management activities planned for the forest, including forest management projects. B. Community wildfire protection plans. The Director shall make data from the forest registry available to local communities developing or updating community wildfire protection plans. C. Requirement to maintain as part of the website containing the forest registry. The Director shall 1. Publish forest assessments created under Section 105. And 2. Maintain a searchable database to track A. The status of federal environmental reviews, permits, and authorizations for forest management projects, including I. A comprehensive permitting timetable. E. The status of the compliance of each lead agency, cooperating agency, and participating agency with the permitting timetable with respect to such forest management projects. I.e., any modifications of the permitting timetable required under Clause I, including an explanation as to why the permitting timetable was modified. And if information about project-related public meetings, public hearings, and public comment periods, which shall be presented in English and the predominant language of the community or communities most affected by the project, as that information becomes available. B. The projected cost of such forest management projects. And C. In the case of completed forest management projects, the effectiveness of such projects in reducing the wildfire exposure within an applicable forest, including wildfire exposure described in subparagraphs A through C of subsection A 3. D. Reliance on existing assessments in carrying out this section. The Director may rely on assessments completed or data gathered through existing partnerships, to the extent practicable. SEC. 104. Shared stewardship. A. Joint agreements not later than 90 days after receiving a written request from a governor of a state or an Indian tribe. The secretary concerned shall enter into a shared stewardship agreement or similar agreement with such governor or Indian tribe to jointly 1. Promote the reduction of wildfire exposure based on the criteria in Section 101, A, 1, B, in forest management areas across jurisdictional boundaries. And 2. Conduct forest assessments under Section 105. B. Additional forest management areas with respect to a shared stewardship agreement or similar agreement with a governor of a state or an Indian tribe entered into under subsection the secretary concerned, if requested by such governor or Indian tribe, may 1. Designate additional forest management areas under such agreement. And 2. Update such agreement to address new wildfire threats. SEC 105. Forest assessments. A. Forest assessments. 1. In general, not later than 90 days after the date on which the secretary concerned enters into an agreement with a governor of a state or an Indian tribe under Section 104. The secretary concerned and such governor or Indian tribe shall, with respect to the forest management areas designated in such state, jointly conduct a forest assessment that A. Identifies using the best available science, wildfire exposure risks within each such forest management area, including scenario planning and wildfire hazard mapping and models. And each at-risk community within each forest management area. B. Identifies potential forest management projects to be carried out in such forest management areas, giving priority primarily to projects with the purpose of reducing wildfire exposure and corresponding risk to communities, including risk to life and structures. The second, wildfire exposure and corresponding risk to municipal watersheds, including tribal water supplies and systems. The third, risk of forest conversion due to wildfire. Or IV, any combination of purposes described in subclauses I through III. And secondarily, to projects with the purpose of protecting critical infrastructure, including utility infrastructure. The second, wildlife habitats, including habitat for species listed under the Endangered Species Act, 16 U.S.C. 1531 as SAC. The third, the built environment, including residential and commercial buildings. IV, resources of an Indian tribe, as defined by the Indian tribe. Or B, any combination of purposes described in subclauses I through IV. C, includes a strategy for reducing the threat of wildfire to at-risk communities in the wildland-urban interface on both federal and non-federal land. E, a timeline for the implementation of forest management projects, i.e., long-term benchmark goals for the completion of forest management projects in the highest wildfire exposure areas so that such projects contribute to the development and maintenance of healthy and resilient landscapes. IV, policies to ensure forest management projects comply with applicable forest plans and incorporate the best available science. And B, a strategy for reducing the threat of wildfire to improve the effectiveness of wildland firefighting, particularly the effectiveness of fuels treatments that would improve wildland firefighter safety during wildfires. D, shall be regularly updated based on the best available science, as determined by the secretary concerned. And E, shall be publicly available on a website maintained by the secretary concerned. 2. Local government participation upon the written request of a local government. The secretary concerned and the governor of the state in which the local government is located may allow such local government to participate in producing the forest assessment under paragraph 1 for such state. 3. Information improvement. A. Memoranda of understanding in carrying out a forest assessment under this subsection. The secretary concerned may enter into memoranda of understanding with other federal agencies or departments, including the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, states, Indian tribes, private entities, or research or educational institutions to improve, with respect to such assessment, the use and integration of advanced remote sensing and geospatial technologies. E. Statistical modeling and analysis. Or i.e., any other technology or combination of technologies and analyses that the secretary concerned determines will benefit the quality of information of such an assessment. B. Best available science and using the best available science for the forest assessments completed under subsection A. 1. The secretary concerned and governor shall, to the maximum extent practicable, incorporate traditional ecological knowledge from Indian tribes. E. Data from state forest action plans and state wildfire risk assessments. i.e., data from the forest registry maintained under Section 103. And IV. Data from other federal, state, tribal, and local governments or agencies. B. Applicability of any PA forest assessments conducted under this section shall not be subject to the requirements of the National Environmental Policy Act of 1969, 42 U.S.C. 4321 as SAC. SEC. 106. Emergency forest management. A. Forest management projects. 1. In general, the secretary concerned, acting through a responsible official, shall carry out forest management projects in forest management areas designated under Section 101 in accordance with this section. 2. Forest management projects. The responsible official shall carry out the following forest and vegetation management activities as forest management projects under this section. A. Conducting hazardous fuels management activities. B. Creating fuel breaks and fire breaks. C. Removing hazard trees, dead trees, dying trees, or trees at risk of dying, as determined by the responsible official. D. Developing, approving, or conducting routine maintenance under a vegetation management, facility inspection, and operation and maintenance plan submitted under Section 512, C. 1, of the Federal Land Policy and Management Act of 1976, 43 U.S.C. 1772, C. 1. E. Removing trees to address overstocking or crowding in a forest stand, consistent with the appropriate basal area of the forest stand as determined by the responsible official. F. Using chemical or reseeding and planting treatments to address insects and disease and control vegetation competition or invasive species. G. Any activities recommended by an applicable forest assessment carried out under Section 105. H. Any activities recommended by an applicable community wildfire protection plan. I. Any combination of activities described in this paragraph. 3. Emergency forest management. A. In general, for any forest management area designated under Section 101, the following shall have the force and effect of law. I. Section 220.4, B, of Title 36, Code of Federal Regulations, as in effect on the date of enactment of this Act, with respect to lands under the jurisdiction of the Secretary. E. Section 46.150 of Title 43, Code of Federal Regulations, as in effect on the date of enactment of this Act, with respect to lands under the jurisdiction of the Secretary of the Interior. I.e., Section 402.05 of Title 50, Code of Federal Regulations, as in effect on the date of enactment of this Act. IV. Section 800.12 of Title 36, Code of Federal Regulations, as in effect on the date of enactment of this Act. B. Utilization of existing streamlined authorities in forest management areas. I. In general, forest management projects carried out under this section shall be considered authorized projects under the following categorical exclusions. I. Section 603, A, of the Healthy Forest Restoration Act of 2003, 16 U.S.C. 6591 bits, A. The second, Section 605, A, of the Healthy Forest Restoration Act of 2003, 16 U.S.C. 6591 D, A. The third, Section 606, B, of the Healthy Forest Restoration Act of 2003, 16 U.S.C. 6591 E, B. IV, Section 40806, B, of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, 16 U.S.C. 6592 bits, B. B. Section 4, C, 4, of the Lake Tahoe Restoration Act, Public Law 106 to 506. 114 Stat. 2353. E. Additional emergency actions subsection, D, of Section 40807 of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, 16 U.S.C. 6592 C, shall apply to forest management projects under this section in the same manner as such subsection applies to authorized emergency actions, as defined in subsection A, of such Section 40807, under such Section 40807. i.e., U.S.E. of expedited authorities in carrying out a forest management project, the Secretary shall apply a categorical exclusion under Clause I, in a manner consistent with the statute establishing such categorical exclusion. And the second, in any area, designated as suitable for timber production within the applicable forest plan, or BB, where timber harvest activities are not prohibited. If fiscal responsibility ACT requirements in carrying out this section, the Secretary concerned shall ensure compliance with the amendments made to the National Environmental Policy Act, 42 U.S.C. 4321 as sec, by the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2023, Public Law 118-5. The U.S.E. of other authorities to the maximum extent practicable, the Secretary concerned shall use the authorities provided under this section in combination with other authorities to carry out forest management projects, including I. Good neighbor agreements entered into under Section 8206 of the Agricultural Act of 2014, 16 U.S.C. 2113a, as amended by this Act. The second, stewardship contracting projects entered into under Section 604 of the Healthy Forest Restoration Act of 2003, 16 U.S.C. 6591c, as amended by this Act. The third, self-determination contracts and self-governance compact agreements entered into under the Indian Self-Determination and Education Assistance Act, 25 U.S.C. 5301 as sec. And IV, agreements entered into under the Tribal Forest Protection Act of 2004, 25 U.S.C. 3115a as sec. B. Expansion. 1. HFRA amendments. The Healthy Forest Restoration Act of 2003 is amended. A. In Section 3, 16 U.S.C. 6502, by inserting at the end the following. 3. Local government. The term local government means a county, municipality, or special district. 4. Special district. The term special district means a political subdivision of a state that A. Has significant budgetary autonomy or control. B. Was created by or pursuant to the laws of the state for the purpose of performing a limited and specific governmental or proprietary function. And C. Is distinct from any other local government unit within the state. B. In Section 603, C. 1, 16 U.S.C. 6591 bits, C. 1, by striking 3,000 acres and inserting 10,000 acres. C. In Section 603, C. 2, B. 16 U.S.C. 6591 bits, C. 2, B. By striking fire regime groups I, or the third and inserting fire regime I, fire regime the second, fire regime the third, fire regime IV, or fire regime V. D. In Section 605, C. 1, 16 U.S.C. 6591 D, C. 1, by striking 3,000 acres and inserting 10,000 acres. And E. In Section 606, G. 16 U.S.C. 6591 E, G. By striking 4,500 acres and inserting 10,000 acres. 2. Infrastructure Investment and JOBS ACT Amendment Section 40806, D. 1, of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, 16 U.S.C. 6592 bits, D. 1, by striking 3,000 acres and inserting 10,000 acres. 3. Lake Tahoe Restoration ACT Amendment Section 4, C. 4, C, of the Lake Tahoe Restoration Act, Public Law 106 to 506. 114 Stat. 2353, is amended. A. By striking Lake Tahoe Basin Management Unit. And B. By inserting applicable to the area before the period at the end. SEC. 107. Sunset. The authority under the subtitle shall terminate on the date that is 7 years after the date of enactment of this Act. Subtitle B. Expanding collaborative tools to reduce wildfire risk and improve forest health. SEC. 111. Modification of the treatment of certain revenue and payments under Good Neighbor Agreements. A. Good Neighbor Authority Section 8206 of the Agricultural Act of 2014, 16 U.S.C. 2113a, is amended. 1. In subsection A. 6. By striking or Indian tribe. 2. In subsection by inserting the following. 11. Special district. The term special district means a political subdivision of a state that A. Has significant budgetary autonomy or control. B. Was created by or pursuant to the laws of the state for the purpose of performing a limited and specific governmental or proprietary function. And C. Is distinct from any other local government unit within the state. 3. In subsection B. A. In paragraph 1, by inserting Indian tribe, special district, after governor. B. In paragraph 2, C. I. In clause I, by inserting special district, after Indian tribe, each place it appears. The second, in subclause I, by striking on. And BB, by striking, and inserting a semicolon. The third, in subclause BB, by striking the period at the end, and inserting a semicolon. And IV, by adding at the end the following. The third, to construct new permanent roads on federal lands that are necessary to implement authorized restoration activities. And BB, approved by the federal agency through an environmental analysis or categorical exclusion decision. IV, to complete new permanent road construction to replace and decommission an existing permanent road that is adversely impacting forest, rangeland, or watershed health. And B, if there are funds remaining after carrying out subclauses I through IV, to carry out authorized restoration services under other Good Neighbor Agreements, and for the administration of a Good Neighbor Authority program by a governor, Indian tribe, special district, or county. And E, in clause E, by striking 2028 and inserting 2030. And C, in paragraph 3, by inserting Indian tribe, special district, after governor. And D, by striking paragraph 4. B, conforming amendment section 8206, A, of the Agricultural Act of 2014, 16 U.S.C. 2113a, A, is amended. 1. In paragraph 1, B, by inserting Indian tribe, special district, after governor. And 2. In paragraph 5, by inserting Indian tribe, special district, after governor. C. Effective date. The amendments made by this section apply to any project initiated pursuant to a Good Neighbor Agreement, as defined in section 8206, A, of the Agricultural Act of 2014, 16 U.S.C. 2113a, A. 1. Before the date of enactment of this Act, if the project was initiated after the date of enactment of the Agriculture Improvement Act of 2018, Public Law 115 to 334, 132 Stat. 4490. Or 2. On or after the date of enactment of this Act. SEC. 112. Fixing stewardship and result contracting. Section 604 of the Healthy Forest Restoration Act of 2003, 16 U.S.C. 6591C, is amended. 1. In subsection B, by inserting, including retaining and expanding existing forest products infrastructure before the period at the end. 2. In subsection D, 3, B, by striking 10 years and inserting 20 years. And 3. In subsection H, by adding at the end the following. 4. Special Rule FOR LONGTERM stewardship contracts. A. In general, a long-term agreement or contract entered into with an entity under subsection B, by the chief or the director shall provide that in the case of the cancellation or termination by the chief or the director of such long-term agreement or contract, the chief or the director, as applicable, shall provide 10% of the agreement or contract amount to such entity as cancellation or termination costs. B. Definition of LONGTERM agreement or contract in this paragraph. The term LONGTERM agreement or contract means an agreement or contract under subsection B. I, with a term of more than 5 years. And E. Entered into on or after the date of the enactment of this paragraph. SEC. 113. Intra-agency strike teams. A. Establishment. The secretary concerned shall establish intra-agency strike teams to assist the secretary concerned with 1. Any reviews, including analysis under the National Environmental Policy Act of 1969, 42 U.S.C. 4321 as SEC, consultations under the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966, 16 U.S.C. 470 as SEC, and consultations under the Endangered Species Act of 1973, 16 U.S.C. 1531 as SEC, with the intent to accelerate and streamline interagency consultation processes. 2. The implementation of any necessary site preparation work in advance of or as part of a forest management project. 3. The implementation of forest management projects under such section. And 4. Any combination of purposes under paragraphs 1 through 3. B. Members the secretary concerned may appoint not more than 10 individuals to serve on an intra-agency strike team comprised of 1. Employees of the department under the jurisdiction of the secretary concerned. 2. Employees of a different federal agency, with the consent of that agency's secretary. 3. Private contractors from any nonprofit organization, state government, Indian tribe, local government, quasi-governmental agency, academic institution, or private organization. And 4. Volunteers from any nonprofit organization, state government, Indian tribe, local government, quasi-governmental agency, academic institution, or private organization. C. Sunset. The authority provided under this section shall terminate on the date that is 7 years after the date of enactment of this Act. SEC. 114. Locally led restoration. A. Threshold adjustment section 14 D of the National Forest Management Act of 1976, 16 U.S.C. 472A D is amended by 1. Striking $10,000 and inserting $55,000. And 2. By adding at the end the following, beginning on January 1, 2027, and annually thereafter, the amount in the first sentence of this subsection shall be adjusted by the Secretary for changes in the Consumer Price Index of all urban consumers published by the Bureau of Labor Statistics of the Department of Labor. B. Forest management projects beginning on the date that is 30 days after the date of enactment of this Act. The Secretary shall solicit bids under Section 14 of the National Forest Management Act of 1976, 16 U.S.C. 472A D for forest management projects under Section 106. SEC. 115. Joint Chiefs Landscape Restoration Partnership Program. Section 40,808 of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, 16 U.S.C. 6592D, is amended. 1. In subsection A. 2. A. In subparagraph B. By striking or at the end. B. In subparagraph C. By striking the period at the end and inserting a semicolon. And C. By adding at the end the following. D. To recover from wildfires. Or E. To enhance soil, water, and related natural resources. 2. In subsection D. 1. A. In subparagraph by inserting in post-wildfire impacts after wildfire risk. And B. In subparagraph if, by inserting, as identified in the corresponding state forest action plan or similar priority plan, such as a state wildlife or water plan, before the semicolon. 3. In subsection G. 2. By inserting in at least once every 2 fiscal years thereafter after and 2023. And 4. In subsection H. 1. By striking in 2023 and inserting through 2030. SEC. 116. Collaborative Forest Landscape Restoration Program. Section 4003 of the Omnibus Public Land Management Act of 2009, 16 U.S.C. 7303, is amended. 1. In subsection B. 3. A. In subparagraph D. By striking species and inserting species or pathogens. B. In subparagraph G. By striking in at the end. C. In subparagraph H. By adding in after the semicolon at the end. And D. By adding at the end the following. I. Address standardized monitoring questions and indicators. 2. In subsection C. 3. A. A. In clause I. By striking in at the end. B. In clause E. By adding in at the end. And C. By adding at the end the following, i.e., include a plan to provide support to collaborative processes established pursuant to subsection B. 2. 3. In subsection D. A. In paragraph 2. I. In subparagraph E. By striking in at the end. E. In subparagraph if, by striking the period at the end and inserting and i.e., by adding at the end the following. G. Proposals that seek to use innovative implementation mechanisms, including good neighbor agreements entered into under Section 8206 of the Agricultural Act of 2014, 16 U.S.C. 2113a. H. Proposals that seek to remove or treat insects or diseases, including the removal of trees killed by or infested with bark beetles in Arizona, California, Colorado, Idaho, Montana, Nebraska, Nevada, New Mexico, Oregon, South Dakota, Utah, Washington, and Wyoming. I. Proposals that seek to facilitate the sale of firewood and Christmas trees on lands under the jurisdiction of the Secretary or the Secretary of the Interior. J. Proposals that seek to reduce the risk of uncharacteristic wildfire or increase ecological restoration activities. I. Within areas across land ownerships, including state, tribal, and private land. And E. Within the wildland-urban interface, as defined in Section 101 of the Healthy Forest Restoration Act of 2003, 16 U.S.C. 6511. And K. Proposals that seek to enhance watershed health and drinking water sources. And B. In paragraph 3. I. By amending subparagraph A. To read as follows. A. 4 proposals in any one region of the National Forest System to be funded during any fiscal year. And E. By striking subparagraph B and i.e. by redesignating subparagraph C as subparagraph B and 4. In subsection if 6. By striking 2019 through 2023 and inserting 2025 through 2030. SEC 117. Utilizing grazing for wildfire risk reduction. The Secretary, acting through the Chief of the Forest Service, in coordination with holders of permits to graze livestock on federal land, shall develop a strategy to increase opportunities to utilize livestock grazing as a wildfire risk reduction strategy, including 1. Completion of reviews, as required under the National Environmental Policy Act of 1969, USC 4321 at SEC, to allow permitted grazing on vacant grazing allotments during instances of drought, wildfire, or other natural disasters that disrupt grazing on allotments already permitted. 2. Use of targeted grazing. 3. Increased use of temporary permits to promote targeted fuels reduction and reduction of invasive annual grasses. 4. Increased use of grazing as a post-fire recovery and restoration strategy, where appropriate. And 5. Use of all applicable authorities under the law. SEC 118. Water Source Protection Program. Section 303 of the Healthy Forest Restoration Act of 2003, 16 U.S.C. 6542, G, 4, B, is amended. 1. In subsection A. By redesignating paragraphs 1 through 7 as paragraphs 2 through 8, respectively. B. By inserting before paragraph 2 as so redesignated the following. 1. Adjacent land. The term adjacent land means non-federal land, including state, local, and private land, that is adjacent to, and within the same watershed as, National Forest System land on which a watershed protection and restoration project is carried out under this section. And C. In paragraph 2, as so redesignated. I. By redesignating subparagraphs G and H as subparagraphs K and L, respectively. And E. By inserting after subparagraph if the following. G. An Acequia association. H. A local, regional, or other public entity that manages stormwater or wastewater resources or other related water infrastructure. I. A land grant Mercedes. J. A local, regional, or other private entity that has water delivery authority. 2. In subsection B. A. By striking the Secretary shall and inserting the following. 1. In general the Secretary shall. And B. By adding at the end the following. 2. Requirements of watershed protection and restoration project under the program shall be designed to A. Protect and restore watershed health, water supply and quality, a municipal or agricultural water supply system, and water-related infrastructure. B. Protect and restore forest health from insect infestation and disease or wildfire. Or C. Advance any combination of the purposes described in subparagraphs A and B. 3. Priorities in selecting watershed protection and restoration projects under the program. The Secretary shall give priority to projects that would A. Provide risk management benefits associated with drought, wildfire, post-wildfire conditions, extreme weather, flooding, resilience to climate change, and watershed and fire resilience, including minimizing risks to watershed health, water supply and quality, and water-related infrastructure, including municipal and agricultural water supply systems. B. Support aquatic restoration and conservation efforts that complement existing or planned forest restoration or wildfire risk reduction efforts. Or C. Provide quantifiable benefits to water supply or quality and include the use of nature-based solutions, such as restoring wetland and riparian ecosystems. 4. Conditions for projects on adjacent land. A. In general, no project or activity may be carried out under this section on adjacent land unless the owner of the adjacent land agrees in writing that the owner is a willing and engaged partner in carrying out that project or activity. B. In fact, nothing in this section shall be construed to authorize any change in I. The ownership of adjacent land on which a project or activity is carried out under this section. Or E. The management of adjacent land on which a project or activity is carried out under this section, except during the carrying out of that project or activity. 3. In subsection C. A. In paragraph 1. By striking with end water users and inserting with end water users to protect and restore the condition of national forest watersheds and adjacent land that provide water. A. To the end water users subject to the agreement. Or B. For the benefit of another end water user. B. In paragraph 2. I. In subparagraph C. By striking or at the end. E. By redesignating subparagraph D as subparagraph E. And i.e. by inserting after subparagraph C the following. D. A good neighbor agreement entered into under section 8206 of the Agricultural Act of 2014, 16 U.S.C. 2113a. Or and C. By adding at the end the following. 3. Cooperation with non-federal partners. The Secretary shall cooperate with non-federal partners in carrying out assessments, planning, project design, and project implementation under this section. 4. In subsection D. A. By amending paragraph 2 to read as follows. 2. Requirement. A water source management plan shall be A. Designed to protect and restore ecological integrity, as defined in section 219.19 of Title 36, Code of Federal Regulations, as in effect on the date of enactment of this subparagraph. B. Based on the best available scientific information. And C. Conducted in a manner consistent with the forest plan applicable to the National Forest System land on which the watershed protection and restoration project is carried out. And B. By adding at the end the following. 4. Reducing redundancy in existing watershed plan, such as a watershed protection and restoration action plan developed under section 304, A. 3, or other applicable watershed planning documents as approved by the Secretary may be used as the basis for a water source management plan under this subsection. And 5. In subsection E. 1. By striking primary purpose of and all that follows through the period at the end, and inserting primary purpose of advancing any of the purposes described in subsection B. 2. SEC 119. Watershed Condition Framework Technical Corrections. Section 304, A, of the Healthy Forest Restoration Act of 2003, 16 U.S.C. 6543, A, is amended in paragraphs 3 and 5 by striking protection and Subtitle C. Litigation Reform. SEC 121. Common Sense Litigation Reform. A. In general, a court shall not enjoin a covered agency action if the court determines that the plaintiff is unable to demonstrate that the claim of the plaintiff is likely to succeed on the merits. B. Balancing short and long-term effects of covered agency action in considering injunctive relief as part of its weighing the equities while considering any request for an injunction that applies to a covered agency action. The court reviewing such action shall balance the impact to the ecosystem likely affected by such action of 1. The short and long-term effects of undertaking such action. Against 2. The short and long-term effects of not undertaking such action. C. Limitations on judicial review. 1. In general, notwithstanding any other provision of law, except this section, in the case of a claim arising under federal law seeking judicial review of a covered agency action. A. A court shall not hold unlawful, set aside, or otherwise limit, delay, stay, vacate, or enjoin such agency action unless the court determines that I. Such action poses or will pose a risk of approximate and substantial environmental harm. And E. There is no other equitable remedy available as a matter of law. And B. If a court determines that subparagraph A does not apply to the covered agency action, the only remedy the court may order with regard to such agency action is to remand the matter to the agency with instructions to, during the 180-day period beginning on the date of the order, take such additional actions as may be necessary to redress any legal wrong suffered by or adverse effect on the plaintiff, except such additional actions may not include the preparation of a new agency document unless the court finds the agency was required and failed to prepare such agency document. 2. Effective remand in the case of a covered agency action to which paragraph 1 B applies. The agency may A. Continue to carry out such agency action to the extent the action does not impact the additional actions required pursuant to such paragraph. And B. If the agency action relates to an agency document, use any format to correct such document, including a supplemental environmental document, memorandum, or errata sheet. D. Limitations on claims notwithstanding any other provision of law, except this section. A claim arising under federal law seeking judicial review of a covered agency action shall be barred unless 1. With respect to an agency document or the application of a categorical exclusion noticed in the Federal Register, such claim is filed not later than 120 days after the date of publication of a notice in the Federal Register of agency intent to carry out the forest management project relating to such agency document or application, unless a shorter period is specified in such federal law. 2. In the case of an agency document or the application of a categorical exclusion not described in paragraph 1, such claim is filed not later than 120 days after the date that is the earlier of A. The date on which such agency document or application is published. And B. The date on which such agency document or application is noticed. And 3. In the case of a covered agency action for which there was a public comment period, such claim A. is filed by a party that I. participated in the administrative proceedings regarding the forest management project relating to such action. And E. submitted a comment during such public comment period and such comment was sufficiently detailed to put the applicable agency on notice of the issue upon which the party seeks judicial review. And B. is related to such comment. E. Definitions L in this section. 1. Agency document. The term agency document means, with respect to a forest management project, a record of decision, environmental document, or programmatic environmental document. 2. Covered agency action. The term covered agency action means A. The establishment of a forest management project by an agency. B. The application of a categorical exclusion to a forest management project. C. The preparation of any agency document for a forest management project. Or D. Any other agency action as part of a forest management project. 3. Any PA terms. The terms categorical exclusion, environmental document, and programmatic environmental document have the meanings given such terms, respectively, in Section 111 of the National Environmental Policy Act of 1969, 42 U.S.C. 4336 E. SEC. 122. Consultation on forest plans. A. Forest Service Plan Section 6, D, 2, of the Forest and Rangeland Renewable Resources Planning Act of 1974, 16 U.S.C. 1604, D, 2, is amended to read as follows. 2. And no additional consultation required under certain circumstances notwithstanding any other provision of law. The Secretary shall not be required to reinitiate consultation under Section 7, A, 2, of the Endangered Species Act of 1973, 16 U.S.C. 1536, A, 2, or Section 402.16 of Title 50, Code of Federal Regulations, or a successor regulation, on a land management plan approved, amended, or revised under the section when A. A new species is listed or critical habitat is designated under the Endangered Species Act of 1973, 16 U.S.C. 1531 as SAC. Or B. New information reveals effects of the land management plan that may affect a species listed or critical habitat designated under that act in a manner or to an extent not previously considered. B. Bureau of Land Management Plan Section 202 of the Federal Land Policy and Management Act of 1976, 43 U.S.C. 1712, is amended by adding at the end the following. G. No additional consultation required under certain circumstances notwithstanding any other provision of law. The Secretary shall not be required to reinitiate consultation under Section 7, A, 2, of the Endangered Species Act of 1973, 16 U.S.C. 1536, A, 2, or Section 402.16 of Title 50, Code of Federal Regulations, or a successor regulation, on a land use plan approved, amended, or revised under the section when 1. A new species is listed or critical habitat is designated under the Endangered Species Act of 1973, 16 U.S.C. 1531 as SAC. Or 2. New information reveals effects of the land use plan that may affect a species listed or critical habitat designated under that act in a manner or to an extent not previously considered. Title II. Protecting Communities in the Wildland-Urban Interface. SEC. 201. Community Wildfire Risk Reduction Program. A. Establishment not later than 30 days after the date of enactment of this act. The Secretary shall jointly establish an interagency program to be known as a Community Wildfire Risk Reduction Program that shall consist of at least one representative from each of the following. 1. The Office of Wildland Fire of the Department of the Interior. 2. The National Park Service. 3. The Bureau of Land Management. 4. The United States Fish and Wildlife Service. 5. The Bureau of Indian Affairs. 6. The Forest Service. 7. The Federal Emergency Management Agency. 8. The United States Fire Administration. 9. The National Institute of Standards and Technology. 10. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. B. Purpose. The purpose of the program established under subsection A is to support interagency coordination in reducing the risk of, and the damages resulting from, wildfires in communities, including tribal communities, in the wildland-urban interface through 1. Advancing research in science and wildfire resilience and land management, including support for non-federal research partnerships. 2. Supporting adoption by Indian tribes and local governmental entities of fire-resistant building methods, codes, and standards. 3. Supporting efforts by Indian tribes or local governmental entities to address the effects of wildland fire on such communities, including property damages, air quality, and water quality. 4. Encouraging public-private partnerships to conduct hazardous fuels management activities in the wildland-urban interface. 5. Providing technical and financial assistance targeted towards communities, including tribal communities, through streamlined and unified technical assistance and grant management mechanisms, including the portal and grant application established under subsection C. 2. A. Encourage critical risk reduction measures on private property with high wildfire risk exposure in such communities. And B. Mitigate costs for and improve capacity among such communities. C. Portal and uniform grant application. 1. In general, as part of the program established under subsection the Secretaries and the Administrator of the Federal Emergency Management Agency shall establish a portal through which a person may submit a single, uniform application for any of the following. A. A community wildfire defense grant under Section 40,803, if, of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, 16 U.S.C. 6,592, if B. An emergency management performance grant under Section 662 of the Post-Katrina Emergency Management Reform Act of 2006, 6 U.S.C. 761. C. A grant under Section 33 of the Federal Fire Prevention and Control Act of 1974, 15 U.S.C. 2229. D. A grant under Section 34 of the Federal Fire Prevention and Control Act of 1974, 15 U.S.C. 2229A.
Well, apparently it was so long that Congress doesn't even want to finish reading it. We only made it, I don't know, probably about 3/5 of the way through. Um, but this bill clearly is just a giant fire-wising bill. Uh, that being said, I would pass it. I don't know why some Democrats decided that they didn't want to pass it, but nonetheless, it is going to go to the Senate. Um, yeah, and that's all I have for you guys today. I will catch you guys here next week. Thank you. Have a great week, everyone.